Prologue. Nerves coursed through her body. She chewed her lip until she tasted blood and forced herself to stop. Finally, she halted her pacing in front of her son's office. She took a deep breath to steady herself before knocking on the door and waiting for a reply. "Come in." A rough voice sounded from the other side. Pushing the door open, she only stuck her head in. Her son looked up at her from his desk and raised an eyebrow. "Mother, I was not expecting you. Take a seat." She was not surprised that he had not been expecting her. She had not come out of her room for the last 5 years except to get food and then return to wallow in her own self-pity. Closing the door behind her quietly, she began to speak. "Isaac, I am sorry about the last few years," she started as she took a seat in one of the new leather chairs in his office. After the attack on the pack, there had been many new additions to the house. The office had been destroyed in the attack, along with most of the house. The office had changed dramatically. The couch she used to sit on was no longer there and had been replaced with a table. The bookcases had been taken down, and all the pack's history was now stored in the library downstairs to keep it safe. The desk was no longer wood but had been replaced with glass, and a laptop sat on the side of it. The only thing that stayed the same was the large window at the back, which was now covered with heavy curtains. "I know I have been a horrible mother, and I understand if you hate me." "Oh, Mother," Isaac said, rubbing the bridge of his nose before looking at her. "I would never hate you. You raised me for the first 15 years of my life, and I am proud of the man I am today. I know you are. You have turned out to be a perfect gentleman, but I feel sorry that I could not give you a father figure. I had a lot of father figures. Kent, my grandfather, and some of the warriors were very good father figures to me. But they were not your father." She interrupted him, and he instantly understood. Her heart felt like it was shattering all over again. Looking at her son with such a broken expression on his face reminded her so much of his father. The truth was, he was identical to his father, with the same eyes, hair, and body structure. There was not one single physical feature that he had inherited from her. "Mother, even if my father were alive, I would not want to be near him. He was a savage beast, and I want you to understand that I am sorry you were put through so much pain with him. It was not pain he put me through. I love him with all my heart." Isaac grunted in annoyance and turned back to his paperwork. "So you loved someone who hurt you? Through all the books I have read, I have never heard of one single mate who would actually want to hurt their mate." Biting her lip, she knew he had a point, but this was her chance. "Okay," she murmured softly, just high enough for him to hear. "Thank you. Now that we are on the same page, is there an actual reason why you came into my office today?" She shook her head as he went back into business mode. "I was just going to tell you that I will be joining you for dinner tonight." He looked up at her, slightly surprised. "And perhaps we can talk about some things." She twirled her thumbs around each other before looking up at him again. "Of course. I will tell Delos that he is free to eat dinner with his parents tonight." "Thank you." She gave a small smile before rising from the chair. "I will see you soon." He smiled at her brightly, showing all his teeth as he used to when he was a young teenager and very happy. "I will." Bowing her head to him lightly, she left the room as quietly as she could. Chapter 1. Placing the small piece of carrot into her mouth, Lauren turned to face her son. "How is the pack?" she asked him as he leaned over his plate and shoveled food into his mouth. Taking a second to breathe, he looked up at her. "It is fine. Everything is peaceful at the moment, and there are no in-pack fights." Nodding her head softly, she started to wonder about the rogues. Perhaps if there had been a lot of rogues sighted, she could easily follow one of them to her mate. What about rogues? Have there been any of them sighted lately? Not really. There have been a few, but they have not even touched the territory. Nodding her head thoughtfully, she pulled some hair behind her ear. "That is very odd," she started. "Rogues usually pass through any territory they like. Have there been any attacks on the surrounding packs?" Isaac shook his head as he chomped down on his steak. No rogue attacks have been recorded in about 7 to 10 years, I think." That was strange. Rogues liked to attack patrol groups or pass through land that was not theirs. What is the sudden interest in rogues? Are you finally going to help me with pack duties? Yes. I think it is time I became active in the pack again. He nodded his head lightly before clearing his throat and giving her his full attention. All right. For the past month, rogues have only been traveling in packs of 7 to 9 at a time, and we have not seen a lone one in years. Nodding her head as well, she started to fork her food and listened to every word her son said. Are they heading north or south? North. I do not know what they are doing, but I have alerted all the packs. Putting what food was on her fork into her mouth, she watched her son. When he did not continue, she talked instead. What are you going to do? Nothing, he immediately said. There is nothing me or anyone can do unless we capture a rogue and force it to tell us where it is going. Somewhere deep inside, she felt bad for pumping her son for information about rogues, but it was her only chance to save her mate. Tonight she would leave, and she knew he would send search teams after her, but she also knew that when he could not find her, he would decide to look for his mate. She knew his mate had been waiting a long time for him. Have you thought about your mate? She asked him, and he shook his head. I am an alpha. I do not have time to think about fairy tales and mates. As long as you are around, Mother, you will be Luna, and I will be the alpha. Isaac. I will not be around forever, and you and I both know the pack is growing restless of not having a true Luna to look after their children. The women do not have a proper Luna to confide in, and I am growing old and tired. So basically you are saying I am selfish, he asked as he set down his cutlery. I never said that you were selfish. You also think I am cruel for making my mate wait for a long time. I seem to remember you saying that when the time is right, your mate will come to you. She is not coming, she told him. You are the one who needs to go after her. I will not sit here as you trash talk my mate. How can I trash talk your mate when you have not even found her? The glare he sent her sent chills down her spine. His breathing became deep, and his face started to turn red. He looked the spitting image of his father. Maybe if you had changed when your mate told you to, then I would not have taken over the pack, and you would not be a depressed woman. These days, nearly every conversation they have ends in a fight about his father. Everything seemed to come back to him, whether that be that she missed him too much or that he was the cause of every single problem there was in life. Do not blame this on your father. Well, maybe if he were my father, then I would not blame it on him, but he is not. He is a monster. I will continue to say this, Isaac, she started as he stood up and made his way towards the door. You and your father are much more alike than you thought, and do not try to deny it. The way you are acting right now proves it. He instantly whipped his head around and stared at her for a moment. I am nothing like my father, he growled and then slammed the door loudly, leaving her sitting there in silence. Staring down at the food left on her plate, she decided to wipe her mouth and push her chair back just as a young maid came out. The maid instantly pulled herself to a halt and bowed her head to her. I am so sorry, Luna. I did not know that you were still here, she gushed out, and Lauren looked up at her. The panic in her eyes immediately softened, and she wondered what it looked like to see her Luna close to tears. At the corner of her left eye, one of them managed to escape, and she quickly wiped it away. Are you okay? She could tell by the sound of her voice that she was unsure whether to ask. Nodding her head lightly, Lauren stood up from the chair. Of course. If you do not mind, could you not tell anyone what just happened? She asked, and the maid nodded. Of course, Luna. I will not tell a soul. Smiling at her lightly, Lauren decided to finally leave the room and pack for the long trip. Chapter 2. Do you understand why I have to leave? Lauren asked Kent as he sat on the couch. He slowly stroked his chin and nodded. You are right, Lauren. Your son does depend too much on you. Sighing in relief, she thought maybe for once he did understand her. May I see the note? Nodding her head, she dug in her back pocket and pulled out the small crumpled note and handed it over to him. His expression changed as he read the note. Wringing her hands together, she anxiously waited to see if he could help her across the border of the pack. Do you not think that maybe it is a trap? He asked her, and she shook her head. No. I feel it in my heart that he is still alive, and I understand if you think it is a trap, but I can at least try, can I not? But one mistake and you could kill yourself in an instant, he told her truthfully. Biting down on her lip, she knew he was right. I also know that you are the only family your son has left, and if you died, then he would have no one. He sighed. She could see him fighting something inside. But if you left, he would be forced to look for his mate and finally take full responsibility. He ran a hand through his short, graying hair and lay his head back on the couch. Who am I to question the love for a mate, though? He asked her as a small smile crept onto his lips. Her spirits instantly lifted, and a large grin spread across her face. Thank you so much, Kent. When do I leave? She watched him look up at the clock and then look back at her. Now would be best. Now? But I have to pack, and he shook his head as he stood from the couch. This is a trip you must take in your wolf form. To be accepted by rogues, you must pretend to be a rogue. Rogues like to spend most of their time in their wolf form. He opened his bedroom door and instructed her to follow him. He did not say anything during the trip through the forest, and she could almost see him trying to step lightly on his feet as she followed his every move. As soon as they were in the forest, he turned to her and started to unbutton his shirt. Another thing about rogues is that they never carry anything with them. When they change into human form, they are always naked. Seriously? She asked him, and he nodded as he finally stripped out of his shirt. Quickly leaving him to finish, she undressed and changed quickly into her wolf, who was leaping for joy. She had not let her out in a few weeks and knew she had been dying to run. Stepping out from around the tree, Kent was there in his wolf form, waiting for her. As soon as he caught sight of her, he swayed his head to instruct her to go further into the forest, and they took off at a gallop. She could see him glance back at her a few times to make sure she was not going to back out. Just as she was building up speed, he stopped. Stopping by his side, she faced a highway. This was the border of her son's territory. It was basically abandoned, and the tarmac looked new here. Glancing over at Kent, she saw him surveying the other side of the road. Then he nudged her back legs, and she stumbled onto the road. Glancing back at him lightly, he nodded his head and turned around to go back into the forest. Slowly taking her time crossing the road, she came to the other side eventually. Sniffing the ground, there was a faint scent telling her this was the border of another pack. The mud felt different underneath her paws here. It was almost completely different. She supposed that never running in her wolf form in her old pack had never really taught her anything about the land there. The soil felt hard and broken up, while in her son's territory, it was soft and easy to step on. Sniffing the ground again, she started to quietly walk deeper into the pack land. The sudden sound of a howl coming from behind her made her glance over her shoulder. A chocolate-colored wolf was suddenly charging at her, and her wolf jumped into action. Her legs sprang forward, and she started running along the border. Her wolf turned it into a game as she weaved in and out of trees and along the borderline. Glancing behind her again, the wolf had been joined by two others snapping their jaws at her. Her legs began to ache as she traveled further and further north. A wolf jumped in front of her as she started to slow down, and she finally came to a stop. Panting loudly, she sank down into a submissive position with her head between her paws and lying flat on the ground. The large wolf cocked his head to the side before shifting back into a human. A rogue showing submission? Is this some kind of joke? The men behind her laughed, and she slowly changed back into her human form, still trying to get enough air into her lungs. I am sorry to inform you, Alpha, she told him slowly as she regained her breath, but I am not a rogue. She watched him kneel down to her height and study her for a moment. You were messing with my patrol wolves. I would call that rogue behavior. I am dearly sorry about that, Alpha. My wolf has not been let out in a while, and she is a bit excited. She watched him study her face before looking at her shoulder. His fingers brushed the hair away from her shoulder. You are mated? Nodding her head, she sighed. Yes. I have a son back in the neighboring pack. Raising an eyebrow, he stood up and waved off his men before helping her stand. What is your name? He asked her, and a smile tugged at her lips. Lauren. Most people call me Luna Lauren, but since you are an alpha, you do not have to worry. A light blush came over his cheeks, and he bowed his head to her. It is nice to meet you, Lauren. It is a pleasure to meet. He trailed off as he thought of something. "Lauren, is your mate not dead?" he asked her, and she shook her head, grinning. "It is hard to explain." Lucas, she said slowly. "I got a note from an anonymous tipper saying my mate was still alive. Do you not think that perhaps it is a trap?" he asked her, and she shrugged. "I do not know, but I feel in my heart that he is still alive. I love him with all my heart, and if he is still alive, I would find him." Lucas slowly took in her words before glancing around. "Do you think it is about the rogues traveling in small packs?" he asked, and she shrugged again. "I am hoping so, which is why I am trying to head north." Lucas glanced around again before nodding. "I will take you there." "Really?" He nodded, smiling. "I am yet to find my mate, Lauren, and if anything happened to her, then I would go to the ends of the earth to bring her back." Lucas morphed into his wolf, and she quickly followed. His territory was not as big as she thought it would be, and she was glad for it. He transformed back into a human form once they reached his border. "You should find one of those small packs of rogues, Lauren. They will be able to show you the way to where you want to go really quickly." Nodding her head, he waved and quickly said, "Keep close to borders, or you will have another encounter with someone like us." Amusement flickered in his eyes before he transformed back into his wolf form and sprinted back towards his home. The border was not very significant. It was a small lake that crossed over into neutral land, and this was her chance to find a group of rogues and hopefully tag along. Chapter 3. Sniffing the wet ground, the smell of rogues was faint but still there. They were still heading north, and it seemed they were not going to change direction. Lifting her nose in the direction they were heading, Lauren started to follow their trail. They avoided pack territories, and if they had to go through one, it was easy to tell they did a quick run through it. In neutral territory, they seemed to walk as if they were trying to save their energy for something big. A scent of a nearby rogue wafted into her nose, and she glanced around. By the smell of it, the rogue was a girl and traveling alone. Just as she took a step forward, someone launched at her side, biting into her flesh. Howling in pain, she snapped at the wolf's neck as it shook its head, trying to tear flesh. Somehow, she managed to get a hold of the wolf's neck and rip it away from her side. The wolf landed against a tree, which knocked her back, before transforming into a human and glaring at her. The slight tint of yellow in her eyes told Lauren she was a rogue. "What are you doing, you stupid pack mutt?" the girl growled at her. Lauren slowly changed back into her human form and stood up. "I am no pack mutt," she snapped back, trying to make it believable. The girl snorted. "Yeah, right. T. You have the scent of different wolves on you." "Well, maybe it is because my mate was recently killed by some hunters, and I have decided to leave the pack." The girl stared at her for a minute before standing up. "You are heading north. You have obviously been rogue enough to know that someone has called us that way." "Yes," Lauren told her as if she knew what the girl was saying. "We'd better stay together then. It is a long way, and we are better protected in small groups." Nodding, Lauren watched her shift into her wolf form and followed suit. The girl did not even glance back at her as she started on her journey again. Trotting up to her, Lauren fell and paced beside her. She was certainly young. Lauren would have guessed she was about 18 or 19, and she was certainly strong. The yellow tint in her eyes told Lauren that she had only been out here for a couple of months, maybe a year. Her wolf's fur matched her human hair perfectly. It was a light brown color, which was almost on the verge of being blonde, and her eyes were obviously blue before she turned rogue. She finally glanced at Lauren once before she howled. There was silence, and she put her head to the ground as she sniffed. She then put her head right up in the air and smelled deeply. Lauren sniffed the air as well. They were at the edge of a pack territory, and they had only been walking for about half an hour. Lauren watched as the girl went to take a step inside before realizing what she was doing. Grabbing her ear, Lauren pulled her back and shook her head before the girl glared at her. Sniffing the ground again, Lauren started to follow the pack line before coming to a line where two pack territories met. Even she knew that this was a weak spot in all packs' defenses because both packs could not decide who would run it. So either neither of them did or both of them did. From the very faint scent of pack wolves, she would say that neither of them did. Just to be sure, she started off in a sprint, and she could hear the girl's paws behind her pounding against the earth as she ran along the two borders. She glanced back at her once to see that the girl was following her every paw step. They made eye contact at that moment before Lauren broke away and pushed her legs harder. A large river signified both of the pack ends, and she was quick to evaluate that it was safe to jump over. Pushing her legs harder, she neared the bank and jumped over the water, which was flowing heavily down the bank. Turning back, she saw the girl come to a stop at the bank and stare at the water as it sloshed around her front paws. The girl took a step back and looked at her in desperation. Lauren instantly saw she did not want to go near the river, but she shook her head and jumped lightly on the ground, indicating that she would have to jump over it. The girl lowered her head, turned around, and took a short run up before giving a very elegant jump and just missing the rough bit of water. Lauren watched as the girl stuck her nose in the air and sniffed. She walked over to a nearby tree and dug in the ground before pulling out some clothes. Raising a wolf eyebrow, it was hard to believe that rogues had clothes stashed around the place just like pack wolves did in their territory. The girl shifted into her human form and pulled on a pair of track pants and a shirt before nudging the leftover clothes toward Lauren. Go ahead and put them on. I am starving and I do not feel like hunting for rabbits. There is a nearby town which is occupied by rogues just a few meters that way. It is a small walk. Nodding her head, Lauren shifted and pulled on the track pants and long-sleeved shirt before following her. The girl's hair was down to her hips and hung loose. So what is your name, newbie? She asked Lauren as she walked up beside her. Lauren, she told her as she shoved her hands in her pockets. I am Yasmine. Lauren could hear the sound of cars as they neared a small town. It literally had a shopping market, a cafe, and a few houses dotted here and there. Basically, it is just lone wolves here, mostly ones with family who have lost their mates. Nodding her head, Lauren completely understood. Some packs kick out wolves that have a breakdown and only allow them back when they have their life sorted out. She was the lucky one who was the Luna and the Alpha's mother. The sound of the bell rang as they entered the small cafe. It was mostly unoccupied except for a rogue sitting by himself in the corner, drinking some coffee. His head snapped up to them, and he sat up. Yasmine stared at him for a long minute before making her way over. Are you heading north? She asked him immediately, and he nodded. He was not much older than her, maybe 20 or so, and his eyes were all yellow. His hair hung down past his ears, and it was black. Heading towards them slowly, he looked up at Lauren. Would you like to join us? Yasmine asked him. We are heading that way, and by the look on your face, you know your way around packs and getting out of danger. He chuckled and took a sip of his drink. I have had my fair share of fights. I was working with vampires a few years ago. You were in that fight against Isaac's pack? Yasmine asked, immediately interested and grinning ear to ear. I was. Took down a couple of pack wolves that day. Forcing down a growl, Lauren clenched her fists tightly at her sides. I also saw when Isaac was dragged away by vampires. He looked like a small child when he cried out for his mate. He chuckled darkly, and Lauren left. As soon as she was outside, she kicked the trash bin, which was sitting outside, sending the contents flying across the road. Letting out a growl, she heard someone approach her from behind. Gee, someone has anger problems. Lauren glared at Yasmine. Do you have something against Isaac or something? She had to think fast. When I was younger, he took everything from me. I worked as a maid for years there, and when my mate showed up, he made his life miserable. His son is a pathetic piece of meat that stands there shouting at his mother, and they all disgust me, she growled, and Yasmine grinned at her. You sound exactly like me when I first turned rogue. The man came out and handed Lauren a sandwich. I forgot to tell you my name. I am James, he told them as he handed Yasmine another sandwich. We'd better start going before it gets dark. It is going to be a 2-day run to where we want to be. Chapter 4. James had turned out to be the quiet sort. He would always have his nose to the ground as he tried to sniff out scents of past rogues. To say the least, he was very good at it. When Lauren smelled the ground, she did not pick up anything until she had smelled it for a minute before catching the faintest scent of a rogue. If James were in a pack, he would definitely be a tracker and probably their top one. Yasmine was the complete opposite of what Lauren would have thought she would be like. She would have thought Yasmine growled a lot at anything moving when really she bounced on her feet and chased small bunnies or squirrels that crossed their path. She was quite interesting to watch when she jumped on her feet. It reminded Lauren how young she was, and it sparked her interest as to why she would have left her pack at such a young age. The sun had started to rise, making Lauren realize that they had been walking all night and yet she was not tired. Was it something about traveling as a rogue or just a wolf thing? It made her wonder what other capabilities a rogue had that a pack wolf did not. When James let out a howl, Lauren saw that Yasmine did not move. Neither James nor Yasmine was moving, and she froze as well, listening to the forest. The sound of birds surrounded them, but there was no reply to James's howl. She heard James let out a frustrated growl and continued to walk forward. Yasmine instantly went back to jumping on the balls of her feet and found a muddy puddle to jump around in, sending droplets of water everywhere. Lauren could see the look James was giving her, and it was not a happy one. Yasmine took the courage to completely ignore him and gave out a little yip for Lauren to join her. Shaking her head, Lauren dropped her head, deciding not to get on James's bad side. Yasmine shook her head at her and suddenly tackled James to the ground. Lauren stopped in her tracks, watching the fight going on between them. They clawed at each other and bit into each other's fur, but never drew blood. It was quite funny to watch James's large wolf submit to Yasmine's tiny one with a pretend whimper and a sarcastic grin. Yasmine grinned, showing all of her teeth, and looked at Lauren. It was funny to watch a rogue be so energetic. It reminded her so much of what pack wolves would do, and yet they were rogues. Shaking her head as James got off the floor, he shook out his ginger hair and stretched his back before he sniffed the ground again. He seemed more relaxed now than he was before. Was that what Yasmine was trying to do? Getting him to loosen up a bit? James instantly sensed something, and he went into a hard sprint, making Yasmine and Lauren follow him. The ground beneath her paws turned from damp soil to really muddy ground. Knowing instantly that they had entered another pack's territory, she glanced around. There was no pack border scent and no clear marking, even as they got halfway through. Instantly knowing that James had just taken them into the middle of a pack's territory, she heard the sound of approaching feet behind her. Looking over her shoulder, a large wolf charged towards her, and she let out an angry growl at it. It growled back, and she stopped in her tracks so she could launch herself at him. Hearing Yasmine's howl for her at the other side of the border, she instantly knew Yasmine was too far away to see her. As James's howls joined hers, she knew they were howling for her. Quickly shifting into her human form, the wolf glared at her. His eyes instantly took in her non-yellow ones, and he transformed back as well. He took in her appearance and then suddenly bowed. "Luna, I had no idea it was you." She frowned, having no idea who this man was. "It is okay," she told him as he stood up and looked around. He ran his hand through his short hair and gave her a long look. "If you do not mind me asking, why are you running with rogues?" Sighing, she pushed her hair behind her shoulder. "I have decided to see what these rogues are doing. Almost as if I am undercover." He frowned. "Should not a warrior do that, Luna?" Rolling her eyes, she crossed her arms over her chest. There are many reasons why a warrior should not be doing this job. Hoping that he believed her lie, he nodded slowly. "If you do not mind, I do not want you to tell anyone that I was here." "Yes, Luna," he muttered as he bowed again and transformed back into a wolf. Turning back into her wolf form, she headed towards the sound of the two rogues howling. As soon as they caught sight of her, Yasmine gave her a quick look over before licking her ear lightly. James inspected her as well, but stared at her for a long time, almost wondering why she was not dead. He sniffed the ground before he started to walk. Lauren blew out a breath of relief as they realized that she must have dealt with the wolf. Isaac's son, POV. Light pressed against his eyes as Isaac groaned and realized it was time for him to get up. He had hardly slept through the night as his body had started to become restless without their mate. Running his hand over his head, he headed into the bathroom. Stripping out of his clothes, he stepped into the shower. The sound of his bedroom door opening told him that the maids were doing their rounds. He heard the girl hum to herself as she stripped the bed and replaced the sheets with new ones. He heard her bundle up the old sheets and leave the room quietly, trying not to disturb him. Sighing to himself, he turned off the water and wrapped a towel around his waist. Stopping in front of the mirror above the sink, he stared at the man who was staring directly back at him. The man who looked back at him looked exactly like the portrait of his father, which was down in the Alpha's library, and he growled in frustration. Curling his hand into a fist, his hand hit the mirror, making it crack and shatter around his hand. Taking his hand away slowly, he let out a sigh. He needed to see his mother and apologize for the way he had talked to her last night. Changing into some jeans and a shirt, he headed down to the room at the end of the hall. The door was closed, and he knocked loudly on it. Deciding not to wait for a reply, he pushed the door open to see an empty bed. "Mother," he instantly called into the room. Frowning, he looked in the bathroom and then the closet, and yet found no sign of her. Smelling the room, he discovered that her scent was faint, meaning she had not even entered the room last night. Beginning to get worried, he headed downstairs to the living room. There was a mated couple sitting on the couch, wrapped in each other's arms, making him flinch in jealousy. Checking the kitchen next, the three maids told him that their Luna had not come downstairs all last night. Taking a seat in the dining room, he began to get worried about where his mother might be. Delos finally came in, followed by William, whom he had chosen a few months ago to be his third in command. William had instantly fallen into the role as if he were made for it, and Isaac was happy that he was taking all his responsibilities. Sensing his unease, they both sat down quietly, and Delos spoke first. "Is something wrong?" he asked as a plate was placed in front of Isaac. "I cannot find my mother," he muttered as he started to eat the bacon. Delos shrugged and began to shovel pancakes into his mouth. "I am sure she is fine," William told him, and Isaac sighed. "Her scent is faint in the house, and it has begun to worry me. What if she turned rogue, or worse, she is dead?" "Your mother would never turn rogue," Delos told him truthfully. "She is too dedicated to the pack to turn rogue." "I know. Perhaps you should speak to Kent," William suggested. Both Isaac's and Delos's eyes flew to him, and he shrugged. "I saw them going into the woods last night." "You did not stop them?" Isaac asked him, and he shook his head. "Why would I? It was Kent. He is one of the most trusted members of the pack." Growling lightly, Isaac pushed his chair back and decided to go search for Kent. Chapter 5. Lauren's POV. "What was it like?" Yasmine asked excitedly. "I mean, I have never killed a wolf before, but I am sure it was exhilarating. Am I right? Was it like you were getting payback on packs?" "I did what I had to do," Lauren said, shrugging as they neared a lake. They had not bathed in days, and she could feel the grime starting to cover her skin. Yasmine walked into the lake with ease, and Lauren jumped back when the icy cold water touched her skin. "It is freezing," she yelled at her. Yasmine shrugged and sank into the water up to her neck. "You get used to it after a while." Putting her feet back in, Lauren followed her and sank down into the cold water. As she shivered, Yasmine laughed at her and swam around in the shallow stream. "Your lips are turning blue," she told her, and Lauren rolled her eyes as she started to rub the grime off her body. "Okay." "I cannot feel my toes," she called out, finally getting out and hopping from one foot to the other. As Yasmine laughed again, Lauren changed into her wolf form and shook out her fur. Grinning lazily at her, she heard a howl nearby. It was James, and he was telling them to hurry up by the sounds of it. Yasmine rolled her eyes and slowly dragged herself out of the river and changed as well. Lauren followed her as they trotted to where James was looking rather annoyed at them both. Letting out a wolfish laugh, she followed behind him. James had been telling them that they were getting close to a lot of rogue scents, which made her a little excited. It meant they were on the right track. For the past few days, they had been keeping to neutral territory, deciding to take the long way around pack territories. Even though they knew she could handle it, they did not want to take any risks. Hearing another howl nearby, James's head perked up, and he howled back. There was silence for a while before a howl responded. James took off in the direction it came from, making them follow, and he howled again. There was an instant reply, and it was nearby. Two wolves came into view as they ran towards them. They were both a dark brown color and basically identical. Looking at Yasmine, Lauren saw her confusion, and she slowed into a walk as James did. He sniffed the two wolves before studying them. Yasmine suddenly looked at her and gave her a grin, and Lauren instantly knew. They were brothers. Isaac's son, POV. So you have no idea where she is? Isaac asked him again, and Kent shook his head and looked at his mate, who was combing their daughter's hair. She was 14 but very dependent on her parents. Her large, glossy eyes were studying him closely as he questioned her father. No, Alpha. The only information she gave me was that he cut himself off and Isaac knew he had caught him. What, Kent? What is it? He sighed and shook his head. I am sorry, Alpha, but it is. You will tell me, Kent. She is my mother and Luna to the pack. He sighed again and ran a hand through his hair. Your mother believes that your father is still alive. Isaac let out an angry growl and clenched his fists. How could she even think that? She had gotten a note. Someone was trying to tell her that her mate was still alive, and she believed it. I am. You let her go to her death. Isaac growled at him. You let her go out, and grabbing his throat, he growled and lifted him off the floor. Kent stared at him, not even trying to get out of his hold as most would. You have sent your own Luna to her death. She will not die. Kent somehow managed to get out. She is pretending to be a rogue. Dropping him, Isaac instantly left, knowing exactly what he had to do. Delos appeared, and Isaac grabbed him. Delos yelped in shock. Shut up, you idiot, Isaac growled, and Delos calmed down, knowing it was him. Where is that boy that used to be a rogue? He asked, and Delos stared at him for a moment. Isaac, are you all right? Do not get off topic. Answer my question. He is training with the rest of the boys. Letting go of his beta, Isaac quickly jogged downstairs and out into the backyard. A group of 15-year-old boys were being trained by some of the older members of the pack who had long since retired from the art of fighting. The rogue boy stood at the back, clenching his fists and looking awkward. Growling, Isaac headed over to him, grabbed the back of his shirt, and turned him towards him. He had let many rogues join since he took over the pack. It was his way of saying everyone could start over as long as they could trust the ways of a pack. Where are the rogues going? He hissed at him, and the boy cowered into his large shirt. Isaac growled and gripped the shirt tighter in his hands. Answer me, boy, or you will be right back where you were. They're heading north. Why? The boy whimpered at his harsh tone, and Isaac sighed. He let go of his shirt and nodded for him to continue. I am not sure, Alpha. Someone just managed to send us all a message to head north until a second message is sent out. How was the message sent so widely? There was silence, and Isaac saw him struggling to explain. It was sent telepathically. How is that even possible? Only people in packs can communicate that way. I am sorry, Alpha. I really am. If I knew, I would tell you. There was a silence as Isaac thought about it, and he could see the boy thinking as well. There was also an urge to do what the voice said, almost as if it were an Alpha commanding us. That is all I can tell you, Alpha. Nodding his head, Isaac walked back to the pack house and thought. Chapter 6. Isaac's POV. Sighing, Isaac placed his glass of brandy down on his office table. Delos sat on the other side, staring into his glass like it was magically going to disappear. What are we going to do? Isaac groaned and ran a hand over his face before staring back up at the ceiling again. He saw Delos shrug from the corner of his eye and take another sip of his drink. I do not know, Isaac, but the pack needs a Luna. We also know that your mother was not always going to be there to fill the role, and now that she is gone. He did not need to say the rest. Isaac knew exactly what he was trying to say. I am not leaving the pack, he told him. Especially when the rogues are acting suspiciously, and they could attack at any moment. But you know they will not, Delos argued back, and Isaac growled harshly. How do you know that? There was silence in the room before Isaac stared at Delos until he bowed his head towards him. I do not know, Alpha. I must go. Delos placed his glass down on the bench before leaving quietly. The feeling of loneliness was a familiar feeling now, and Isaac was starting to get tired of it. There was a small knock on the door, and a small head poked itself into the room. A small girl appeared beside it, along with a young boy who was only a year or two older than the girl. Placing his cup down, Isaac sat up straight to look at the two young people. Good morning, he said lightly as the girl looked around nervously. Please take a seat. The boy scrambled into the seat as fast as he could, and he was eager to tell him something while the girl gripped the front of her dress in her two tiny hands and slowly made her way over towards the other chair. As she scrambled into the chair, the boy grinned at him. Mr. Alpha. We understand that you are busy, he started as he leaned onto the wooden desk and placed dirty fingerprints on the shiny outside of it. But I have a project at school. We have to do an interview with someone who they think is important in the pack, and since you are the Alpha, I think you are very important. Chuckling, Isaac nodded as the boy rummaged through his coat pocket and brought out a piece of paper with some typed writing on it. What is your name? He asked before looking up at Isaac with his big brown eyes. Passing him a pencil from the desk, Isaac replied, Isaac Jordan Whalen. The boy scribbled it down and looked back at him. Position in the pack. Alpha, he muttered before writing it down and smoothing out the paper and squinting his eyes at it. What do you do in your position? He looked up at Isaac and he smiled at him. I protect the pack from rogues and other packs by making treaties or chasing them off. The boy scribbled it down on the paper while sticking his tongue out the side of his mouth. How long have you had the position? He looked up at Isaac and he sat back in his seat. Well, I started dealing with pack problems when I was 14, but I was actually handed the position when I was 16, so 4 to 6 years. The boy scribbled it down again and then read the last question. Why did you choose this position in the pack? I did not. It was handed down to me by the pack's old beta, Kent. Why not your daddy? The young girl asked, and Isaac looked towards her. Well, my father had died before he could pass it down to me. Or even meet me, he reminded himself in his mind. Before she could open her mouth, there was a knock on the door. Come in, he shouted towards the door. A young boy about the age of 17 or 18 opened the door. Alpha, I am sorry, but his eyes locked onto the younger girl, and he instantly rushed over to her. Susie, I have been looking everywhere for you. He rushed over to the young girl, lifted her into his arms, and nuzzled her neck lightly. His eyes looked over the room before landing on the smaller boy. Daryl, did you tell your sister to run off with you? You know your mother will have my neck if she found out that you had run off again with your sister. I was supposed to be watching both of you. Clearing his throat, Isaac stood up. It is all right. Not knowing his name, the boy bowed to him before speaking. My name is Zach, Alpha. I am so sorry that they bothered you. No, they did not. Daryl here was just doing a project for school with his younger sister, and I was perfectly safe. Thank you so much for looking after my mate and her brother. The word mate sprung something in Isaac's chest, and he smiled lightly. It is no problem. Thank you, Mr. Alpha, Daryl shouted to him as they left the room, leaving Isaac chuckling. Lauren's POV. Brothers? It was unusual that siblings would turn rogue together, let alone still travel together. Lauren was surprised at first until they both moved forward towards her and Yasmine and sniffed them lightly. One of them growled at her, and she growled right back, sending the message that she was a rogue and they had to deal with it. Letting out a huff, the larger of the two brothers changed back and glared at her. Are you heading north? James nodded his large wolf head and dug at the ground, indicating that they should start going. It was so difficult to communicate when they could not communicate telepathically. Groaning mentally, Lauren watched as the brother morphed back into his wolf form and took off running again. Sighing, she took off after them. Mother. Her son's voice came into her mind, and she slowed her pace and growled lightly. Mother, please come home. How are you able to contact me? She instantly asked him back, and there was a short silence. I am using all of my alpha power to do this. I will probably be passed out for the next few days. There was another silence. Are you actually rogue? Snorting, she rolled her eyes. No, I would never be so stupid. This is for your father. My father and your maid are dead, mother, and you know it. He is not dead, Isaac, and even if he is, then I have to at least try. She heard him sigh in the connection before she cut him off. As soon as she did, she realized that she was way behind the others and she stopped in her tracks. When she slowed her pace, she did not realize that she was going that slow. Sniffing the ground, she smelled their trace. Glad that it was still slightly strong, she followed it slowly, making sure she followed their every step. She started to near a river, and she slowly trudged through it before emerging on the other side to smell the ground. Their scent was strong here as well, and she looked up to see all four of them frozen. Coming up to them, she saw them staring deep into the forest, but not really looking at anything. What is happening? Chapter 7. Lauren's POV. Lauren stared at the four rogues as they stared into the forest. Yasmine was the first to snap out of it. She whined and then looked at her. Her wolf lips curled into a frown, and Lauren slowly walked to her. The two brothers changed into their wolf form as soon as they regained their senses. Did you all hear that? Lauren nodded her head along with Yasmine as James morphed back into his human form. She heard him grunt and scratch the side of his head. Do you know where it is? He asked the two brothers, and both of them shrugged. I have never heard of the place. Perhaps we should just keep heading north. No, it will lead us nowhere. We will be met by the ocean, and I would rather not smell salt water. What do you suggest we do then? We cannot just stay here. We will be caught by a patrol or a pack. Changing back, Lauren paced from one foot to the other, slightly uncomfortable. I do not mean to intrude on your little debate, but perhaps I could help, she suggested, trying to sound helpful. How? The taller of the two boys asked. Could you remind me where we are going again? She asked, and James sighed, crossing his arms over his chest. Craven's Forest. The name sounded familiar. Sitting down on a fallen tree, Lauren scratched at the top of her head, trying to think. Craven's Forest, she repeated to herself, trying to memorize some of the things she had read back when she was much younger. Then it hit her. Craven's Forest was a large, isolated piece of land where no creature would dare walk because of the marshy, swamp-like ground. I know where it is, she said slowly, trying to remember anything very specific. Do you know whereabouts in Craven's Forest we need to actually be? She asked, and they all shrugged. No. The leader just said there will be a welcome for us. Sighing, it made it even harder to actually enter the forest. Most of it was surrounded by large hills, and the small pathways were often covered with hunter traps. Or so the story said. Right, I knew that. She eyed the rogues and stood up. I could take you there easily. We have to cross through a few parched lands. Oh no, the brothers automatically replied, shaking their heads and every limb on them. We are not going into any pack lands. The taller of the two spoke, clenching his hands. Well, did you cross straight in the middle or what? Sighing, Lauren crossed her arms over her chest. I have found a much safer way to actually get across the pack lands. I learned it from the days I actually was a pack member. The brothers slowly agreed to her request, and she phased back into her wolf form, urging them to follow. Hopefully, this would be the last leg of her journey to her mate. Isaac's son, POV. Growling, Isaac banged his fist against the glass table, sending a large crack through it. The three women chatting suddenly stopped and looked at him with wide eyes. Looking up at them, he sighed and waved his hand at them. Sorry, ladies. They returned to their conversation, and an arm wrapped around his shoulders. Isaac, perhaps you need some good old-fashioned cocoa. Looking down, he smiled at his grandmother's suggestion. It is okay, grandmama. No, come on. I will not have you trashing the pack house, and the kitchen is the place you will do the least damage. Frowning at her logic, he followed her towards the kitchen. He had only been in here once or twice when he was a young boy, but it still had that smell of chocolate cookies, and he inhaled it immediately. Here. A cup was forced into his hands, and he looked at his grandmother, who was staring at him. "Come on, drink up." Sighing, he brought the cup to his lips and took a large swallow, burning the back of his throat in the process. "Happy?" he asked her, and she rolled her eyes. "You know you need to stop worrying about your mother," she told him as she leaned onto a nearby counter. "She needs my protection." "She is not a child," she reminded him. "I know that you feel protective of her because she is your mother, but she is not a child." "What if I lose her, Grammy?" he asked her, and she sighed and shook her head. "For those we lose, there is always an opportunity for another." Frowning, he swallowed the rest of the drink. "Are you scared?" she asked him, and he nearly choked on the cocoa. "What?" he managed to sputter out. "Are you scared that she will find your father in the end?" "Of course not." "What if she does, and she brings him back?" "You must remember that you will have to instantly hand back over your alpha role to him since he did not legally give it to you." "I will fight for it," he growled, and she shook her head. "When did fighting solve anything? Have you learned nothing from what your mother has been telling you for the last 20 years? Groaning, he placed the cup down on the counter. "That man does not deserve to be alpha. He has as much right to it as you do, Isaac. I seem to remember most of the treaties were made under his name rather than any other alpha in our pack's history. They were afraid of him." "How many have you lost?" she suddenly asked him, catching him off guard. "Excuse me?" He looked down at her, and she narrowed her eyes. "How many have you lost?" "That is none of." "How many, Isaac?" she asked again, more demanding. "5, he muttered, and she shook her head in disappointment. "You know your father was more than just feared. He also upheld those treaties, and he was a very honorable man. He protected those packs with his life. Now, if you excuse me, I believe you have some things to think about," she muttered, setting her own cup down and leaving him there staring after her. Mystery POV. His head scraped against the brick wall, and he groaned. Sitting up, he glanced around the brick room. It was just him in here. There was a black metal door, and the only light came through a crack in the concrete wall. Shuffling slightly in his spot as a drop of something dripped onto his head, he looked up. A shutter was opened, and a man stood there grinning. "Rise and shine, Cupcake. You are going to have a party." He chuckled before dumping a bucket of water onto his head, making him cringe and shuffle again. The shutter slammed shut, and he stood up slowly. His legs felt like they could not hold him anymore, and he held himself against the wall and glanced at his hands. The bone had started to poke through his skin, and he crawled slowly towards the puddle which had formed on the floor. The man who stared back at him was not the early 20-year-old. White hairs had started to form on his scalp, and his cheeks were hollow from the lack of nutrition. It made him wonder how long he had been asleep, and then a thought suddenly hit him. Lauren. Chapter 8. Lauren's POV. The trip only took a day and a half, and Lauren was surprised they were even that close. She knew they were there the instant she saw a large mountain that disappeared into the clouds. Transforming back, she wiped at her dirty knees and stared at the sun as it started to disappear behind the mountain. "We have to get past that mountain in the next hour, or we will have to wait until tomorrow." The 3 wolves behind her nodded and started to walk forward, but she shot her arm towards Yasmine, who was about to step in front of her. "We have to be careful and precise about our movements from now on," she told them. "Follow directly in my footprints." She had no idea what she was doing, but she morphed back into her wolf form and started to go on a quick jog towards the mountains. She remembered the book saying something about there being an unguarded passage through the middle of a mountain because it was dangerous to be near or pass through. She guessed that would be their best bet to get to the other side without being killed or badly wounded. Now the hard part was going to be finding that passage. She was sure it said something about it in the book, and she racked her brain trying to remember it. Peering through the bush, she could already see a hunter. He was setting up a trap by the entrance through 2 of the mountains. Yasmine came up beside her, and Lauren turned to her. She raised a finger to her lips in a silencing motion, and Yasmine crouched low to the ground. A younger man came up beside the hunter and said a few words which Lauren did not quite catch before they both moved away down the larger track. Glancing around the area, she finally emerged from the forest. "Okay, "Come on," she said, ushering the 4 rogues out. "Where now?" Yasmine asked. Studying the ground, there were fewer footprints heading down the smaller path than the larger one. "This way," she muttered quietly before phasing into her wolf form and getting into a slow run. The path was most likely laced with traps from the hunters, and she kept to the further side of the path where there seemed to be even fewer footprints. A gunshot was fired from far away, but it made Yasmine jump and tumble into her. Swiveling around to her, Lauren studied her shaking form and quickly knew she was nervous. Biting her ear playfully and then nuzzling her neck, Yasmine slowly started to calm down, and Lauren gave her a wolfish grin. She smiled back at her before nuzzling Lauren forward. Glancing back at the boys, Lauren finally turned around to see a large opening in a rocky mountain edge. It was a little bit up the side, but it seemed safe for her to climb in her human form. Changing back, she studied it for a moment before slowly making her way over. Looking over her shoulder, the rogues nodded, and she started to climb the rocky wall. Isaac's son, POV. Leaning back in his chair, Isaac stared at the pieces of document in front of him while tapping his fingers on the hard wooden table. Running his hand over his unshaved chin, he went to pick up a pen when there was a knock on the door. "Come in," he grunted as he signed his name at the bottom of the paper. Looking up, a young maid stood there in the doorway. "Yes, there is a young human man at the door for you, sir." Sliding his chair back, Isaac could not help but let a smile slip onto his face. Stepping out of his office, he immediately saw him. He was standing there glancing around the foyer like it was his first time stepping into the place. "Marcus," he said, opening his arms. Marcus looked directly at him, and a large grin fell onto his face. "Isaac." Embracing him in a hug, Isaac pulled back and studied him. "You look good, my friend," he said, and Marcus shrugged. "Life has been treating me well lately." Nodding, Isaac glanced behind him to see his human wife. "Rosie," he said, kissing her cheek and finally crouching in front of the pram that sat beside her. "Hello, little Olive," he said, running a finger over her smooth cheek. She looked up at him wide-eyed. "How are you, my little niece?" She reached forward with her hands and let out some baby noises, making him laugh as she wrapped her tiny hands around his large finger. "She is strong," he told them, pulling away from her, and Marcus smiled. "You are not thinking of recruiting her for your army outside, are you?" Laughing, Isaac shook his head. "No. Unfortunately, I do not recruit humans anymore since the incident with you and the couch." Chuckling, Marcus shoved his hands in his pockets. It was his fault anyway. He should have controlled his wolf more. "Do you want anything to drink? Eat?" "Just coffee," his wife finally spoke before unstrapping Olive from her pram and taking her into the large living room. "Is she okay?" Isaac asked him, heading towards the kitchen. Marcus nodded and shook his recently cut hair. "Yeah, she is just tired from all the late nights she has with the baby." "I do not know why you two will not just move into the pack house or the pack village, then live in the human village." Marcus sighed and shook his head. "Unfortunately, it is a human thing and something you would not understand." Nodding his head, Isaac pushed open the kitchen door. 3 maids were standing by the oven chatting while another was busy running around the kitchen. Finally, one by the oven saw him and smiled. "Good afternoon, Alpha," she said, coming over. "How may I help you?" "2 cups of coffee, please." She nodded and ran off to make them. Turning to Marcus, Isaac ruffled his hair and grinned. "I would have expected you to grow in the last year." Snorting, Marcus swatted his hand away. "I am older than you, and you always seem to find a way to make me feel like a little kid. I am the one who is married and has a baby as well." Chuckling, Isaac leaned back against the counter. "Well, you are just one of the lucky ones, I suppose," he mused as he turned towards the maid to get the 2 cups she was holding out for them. Lauren's POV. Getting a good hold on the rock above her, Lauren pulled herself up onto the ledge and slowly moved across into the dark tunnel. Looking down, she saw Yasmine concentrating on her every movement until she watched a rock crumble under her hand. She let out a squeal before grabbing onto something hard. "It is all right, Yasmine," Lauren shouted down to her, and she finally made her way to the ledge and pulled herself up along with the boys. Okay, I think she was cut off by her own scream when someone grabbed her arm and shoved her against the rock wall. A large man stood there. "Welcome," he grunted before flicking on the light on his torch. Turning around, James had already started to follow the man, and Yasmine looked at her. "This is actually really creepy," she muttered to Lauren, and she placed a hand on her shoulder. "Do not worry, Yasmine. Just keep close to me and the light." She nodded and walked in front of her, and Lauren kept a steady pace behind her. The rock under her feet was smooth to walk on, and there were no slopes or dips for her to trip on, which was extremely odd. A light appeared as they turned the corner, and she squinted her eyes. The sound of howls entered her ears, and she felt Yasmine change under her hand. Transforming with her, Lauren appeared on the ledge. A large group of rogues stood around a round platform. The number of rogues was unnatural, and she stumbled back in shock and fear. Was there anyone with this much power? Chapter 9. Lauren's POV. Scanning the area, I saw a round stage in the middle of the crowd, and most of the rogues were already congregated around it. A small building was placed behind it, and a path led from it to the stage. Following Yasmine down the side of the cliff, she started to merge into the crowd. From the looks Lauren was getting from the surrounding rogues, she knew she stuck out like a sore thumb. Squeezing between two very big wolves, she stopped beside Yasmine, who had sat down and was waiting for the show. Sitting down slowly beside her, Lauren glanced around. Many of the rogues were growling and snapping their jaws at each other, while others were at each other's throats. A body was shoved into her, and she growled at it. The rogue looked at her, and fear was the only thing in her eyes. She was a small wolf, almost half her size, and Lauren was considered small. She watched her slowly move away from her and back into the large crowd as the sun started to disappear behind the mountain. A wolf beside her let out a howl, followed by another rogue's howl, until most of the rogues were howling in chorus. A man appeared in front of the building, making her sit up straighter so she could see him better above the crowd. His fangs hung over his lip, and his lips were pulled up in a smirk. "Good evening, my friends," he bellowed out as he made his way onto the round stage. "Perhaps you are wondering why I have called you all here today." He chuckled and gestured towards the door, where two large men had appeared, a man hanging limply in their grasp. Her wolf howled in joy as she saw the body, even if it was only half the man they once knew. Isaac's long hair covered his face, making her unable to see it. The only thing he was wearing was a pair of pants which had holes all over them. His ribs stuck out, and she could tell he had not eaten in a while. She whimpered mentally. "This man here is actually an alpha," he shouted out into the crowd as they dropped Isaac in front of him. "Even though he may not look like it. We have been torturing him for the last 20 years by taking away his memory." Growling lightly, Lauren rose to her feet and dug her nails into the hard earth. How dare he take away her mate's memories? This alpha will be the 5th alpha we have captured and killed from the strongest packs in the world. Perhaps some of the older rogues remember the 4th alpha we killed of the Titans pack. Howls sounded from the crowd as Lauren tried to rack her brain for any memory of the Titans pack. They were completely destroyed after their Luna had failed to provide the pack with an heir following their alpha being killed by rogues. Now, as most of you know, this alpha's Luna did unfortunately give birth to a son, but thankfully for us, he is nothing like his dear father here, and he is losing pack members and treaties faster than any other pack has done in the past. Frowning, Lauren had not realized how many of the pack's treaties they had lost, but she did notice the number of pack members relocating to surrounding packs. This was his plan to take her pack down? Growling again, the vampire laughed and grabbed Isaac by the hair and lifted his head up towards him. "Now do you feel that your son is failing your pack?" There was no reply from her mate, and she whimpered as she took a step towards him. "Pity, it would have been nice to tell your son that his father disowned him before he was killed." He waved his hand towards a large wolf. The brown, patchy wolf came up behind Isaac, who was still bent forward on the floor. The large brown wolf growled and opened his mouth just as her wolf pushed her forward, and she launched herself at him. Ripping out his exposed neck, she turned away from the dead rogue and towards the vampire who was staring at her. "Well, this is a nice surprise." He tapped his finger on his chin. "Unfortunately, I do not know who you are, so why do you not introduce yourself to the crowd?" Growling at him, she crouched down ready to pounce. "I would not do that, my dear. You see, these rogues around me would protect me in a second, and you would be dead within that second." Looking around at the rogues, she knew she would be in trouble. "Do you not remember when we killed all those rogues 20 years ago?" Her wolf asked, and she sighed. "That was you, not me," she told her, and the wolf sighed. "Well then, I can kill them. I am much stronger than I was 20 years ago, Lauren. If you let me out fully, then I could protect Isaac and kill every rogue, plus that sick vampire. Are you sure?" Lauren felt her nod her head mentally, and she growled at the vampire again before letting her wolf free. "Isaac's POV, son." Raising his arms in front of his face as his opponent threw a punch at him, Isaac took the advantage and aimed a punch at his stomach. The man grunted before Isaac got a hold of him and hit him again in the stomach. He groaned as Isaac let him go. Watching as he stumbled back, Isaac kicked his leg out from underneath him, and he landed with a thud on the floor. "Perhaps next time, Ronald," Isaac chuckled as he helped him to his feet. Ronald grunted and limped away towards his mate, who was comforting him immediately. "Isaac." Delos was at his side as Isaac wiped the sweat from his forehead with a nearby towel. "I have some interesting news for you." "You have?" Delos nodded. "There has been an increase in rogue sightings near Craven's Forest." Craven's Forest? Having no idea what he was talking about, Isaac heard him sigh. "It is the one surrounded by hunters and dangerous mountains." Nodding slowly, Isaac started to walk back towards the pack house. "Why are they there?" "I am not sure, Alpha. Unfortunately for us, we are not rogues, and perhaps that is where the meeting place is." Groaning, Isaac moved his hair back away from his face. "If there has been an increase there, that would mean that." Delos nodded and rested his hand on his shoulder. "Your father is alive." Chapter 10. Isaac's son, POV. "According to the law, you are not the alpha of this pack," the elder told him as he closed the large law book on the table. "Unless our Luna does not bring back your father alive, then you are not alpha, and the responsibility of the pack is legally in Kent's hands." Kent's head lifted up to stare at the elder. "Pardon?" By the looks of it, he was slightly shocked to be back in his role as Beta. "Since Isaac has not resigned, you cannot pass down your role to Delos yet." "This is ridiculous," Delos growled at the elder. "Isaac has been alpha of this pack for the past 4 years, and you are telling him he is legally not alpha anymore? It is stupid." "I am sorry, Delos." The elder shut the book before shoving it under his arm and leaving. "I am going to slaughter my mother," Isaac growled, clenching his hands into fists. "Being alpha is the only thing I have." "Isaac, I am sorry." Isaac stopped Kent in his sentence with a glare. "You'd better run along to your pretty little mate before I kill you as well." Kent bowed his head quickly and walked out of the room, leaving Isaac with Delos, who headed over to the brandy cabinet. Isaac watched him open it and pour himself a drink before handing him one as well. "So I suppose you'd better move your stuff out of this room before your mother arrives with your father." "I do not even know if he is alive yet," Isaac told him, taking a sip, and Delos shrugged. "There is no way he would not be. From what my mother tells me, a mate bond is the strongest thing that can hold 2 people together. If he dies, then you do not have a Luna, and you would need to leave the pack to find her." Grunting, Isaac moved in his seat, trying to get comfortable. Or should he call it his father's seat, since he still basically owned the place? God, he hated him. He had not even met him, and yet his hatred grew for him every day. Downing the rest of his drink, he slammed his laptop shut and stood up. Grabbing it, he left his cup on the table before leaving his father's office. Lauren's POV. Her body slowly shifted back into her human form, and Lauren finally let out the breath she had been holding. Her legs started to ache from where they were folded underneath her body, and she finally looked up towards Isaac. He still had not moved, and she scrambled over towards him. "Isaac," she said, lifting up his head so she could see his face. His eyes were closed, and his breathing was soft. "Isaac, open your eyes. It is okay." There was no response from him, and she moved his hair away from his face. The sparks she used to know tingled in her hands, and he stirred slightly, but other than that, there was no movement. The sound of ground crumbling made her turn around and growl at whoever it was. Yasmine stood there with her hands raised slightly. "Lauren, I can help." Narrowing her eyes at her, Lauren looked behind her for any movement. "How do I know I can trust you?" she asked her, and Yasmine sighed. "We traveled together for 2 months. Not once had I attacked you or threatened you in any way." Nodding slowly, Lauren let her come closer and kneel down beside her and look Isaac over. "He is under some kind of drug effect. May I?" She gestured to touch him, and Lauren nodded. She touched his cheek softly before bringing her hand back, and before Lauren could stop her, she slapped him. Yasmine turned back to look at her. "I thought it would." A hand came out of nowhere and clamped itself around her wrist. Lauren's eyes traveled up the arm to the body it belonged to, where the face turned to face Yasmine. "Did you just slap me?" he growled out, tightening his grip on Yasmine's wrist. She whimpered and looked at Lauren for help. "Isaac, stop. It is okay." She was only helping. His head turned to her, and she saw his eyes narrow at her behind the long hair, and he lost his grip on Yasmine. "Lauren." Sitting Isaac down, he stared at her for a long moment, trying to take in her words. "So let me get this straight. I was kidnapped by rogues and brought here after the rogue attack." "Yes. I mean, do you not remember that?" He shook his head slowly as he tried to remember anything. "Okay. So, what is your last memory before you woke up here a few hours ago?" "Well, I just dislocated your arm, and we just left the doctor's office. Then, nothing." Standing up, Lauren stretched her back and watched him look over her body in awe. "I am really sorry, Lauren. I mean, I was a jerk. If I could go back then, I would not have done it at all. If I had only known why." He muttered the last part to himself before he grunted and moved his injured leg. "So tell me how many years I have been missing?" 20. Nearly 21 years. "Why would they keep me so long and just not kill me?" he asked her, and she shrugged. "I do not know. Perhaps I should explain a lot of things to you. From where your memories leave you, actually improved your personality a lot, and when I say a lot, I mean drastically." He was silent for a moment before he nodded. "Did I show you the humans?" Nodding, she helped him to his feet again. "You told me a lot of things." He winced as he stood up and hopped on one leg for a moment before resting his weight on her. "Okay, just let me let this sink in for a moment before you tell me any more." He ran his hand through his hair and shoved it back out of his face. Chuckling, Lauren watched Yasmine move beside him, and he placed a hand on her back. "I will explain everything else when we get back to the pack house." He nodded as she shifted. The look on his face was of pure shock as he nearly fell over again. Chapter 11. Lauren's POV. Wrapping Isaac's arm around her shoulder, he grunted as they entered the pack lands. Lauren could already feel her connection with the pack, and when she heard Isaac sigh, she knew he did as well. Yasmine stayed in her wolf form for the whole trip, not bothering to change back into her human form when they rested. A voice started to shout at her through the pack link. "How dare you set foot into this land with that monster?" She heard him growl at her with so much force, she nearly bolted out of the pack lands. "How dare you speak to me that way?" she thought as she lifted Isaac further from the floor as he stumbled over a few rocks. There was a loud growl in the link before it was cut off. Setting Isaac down, she glanced around the area. A patrol came this way on a regular basis, and she gestured Yasmine closer. "You have to stay close to me now. You are still counted as a rogue. Not for long." She heard Isaac grunt as he shifted himself against the tree. "If you want, I will let you join the pack." Yasmine looked at him, confused for a moment, before nodding her head, and Lauren smiled at her. "Thank you, Isaac." She moved his long locks out of his face as he smiled. "Anything for my mate." The sound of dirt being shifted alerted her and made her stand up and face towards the sound, trying to block whoever it was from view. The group of 4 wolves finally approached them, and the leader transformed back in mid-stride. "Luna, it is good to have you back." Lauren watched them all bow, and she sighed deeply. "You may rise," she told them as they straightened. The man in front of her glanced behind her and smirked. "You brought us rogues, Luna?" "They are not rogues." She instantly barked back as he smirked at Isaac. "They are so petty, Luna. Perhaps we should just kill them." "How dare you suggest killing my own mate?" she growled at him, and he instantly looked shocked and dropped to his knees. "I am so sorry, Luna." "If I had known," he drifted off, and Lauren snorted before turning away from him. "He needs help. I need one of you to run back to the pack house and get a doctor on standby." One of them immediately took off as she lifted Isaac from the floor, and the leader had transformed back before showing her his back. Placing Isaac on it, she transformed back into herself and kept her eyes on him the whole way to the pack house. "Isaac's POV, son." Isaac sat on his bed, leaning forward with his head in his hands. This would be the perfect moment when his mate would be here with him. She would wrap her arms around him and kiss away his worries as His thoughts were cut off by a smell drifting into his nose. His head shot up, and he sniffed again. It was like all his desires in one scent. Groaning, he stood up as it completely took over him. He was already on the stairs when he saw her. She stood behind his mother, trying to shield herself from any passers-by. He almost smirked when he noticed she was naked. Seeing as his mother was naked as well, he supposed they met on his mother's trip. He watched as a maid handed them both clothing, and she quickly pulled them on while his mother stood there holding the clothes. Then it clicked. She was back. Growling, his hand gripped tighter on the handrail, and he practically ran down the stairs before grabbing her around the neck. "You brought him back," he growled at her as she stared at him with shock. "You brought my monster of a father back." She stared down at his hand in shock before he squeezed her neck a little tighter. "Where is he?" "I want to destroy." He was cut off when a hand was placed on his shoulder. Sparks shot through his hand, up his arm, and straight to his wolf as he began to howl in joy. His hand instantly let go of her, and he turned towards his mate. "You are mine," he growled to her as she nodded and bared her neck towards him, allowing him to bend forward and mark her right there. Isaac POV, the original Isaac. The bright light burned in his eyes as he opened them. Staring around the room, his mate lay peacefully on the couch, and he smiled lightly. He felt like he had not smiled in years, and he liked the feeling of being able to smile again. He did not understand why she would want to be here, though, or why she would want to come after him. He had hurt her in a way no mate should, and he felt guilty. His heart wanted to collapse, and he felt his wolf spring to life. "She is with us. She is safe." He felt his head and noticed that someone had thankfully shaved off the long hair, which had grown long and disgusting. His stomach growled loudly as soon as he glanced at the food on the small tray beside him. Grabbing the bowl of soup, he quickly swallowed it down before the door opened, revealing a man. "Glad to see you are eating." The doctor mused as he walked over towards him. "You seem to be well hydrated, and I can see you have got an appetite." Grinning lazily at him, Isaac glanced at Lauren to see her stirring on the couch as she started to wake up. Heart rate normal, color coming back. He took out a thermometer from his pocket, shook it before placing it in his mouth for a few seconds as he wrote something down and then pulled it out of his mouth. "Good. Temperature normal. I would say you're free to go, but seeing as you only got back yesterday, I am going to keep you here just to be safe." He wrote something down on the clipboard before looking up at him. "Would you mind if I ask you a few questions?" he asked Isaac, and he shook his head before the doctor smiled. "Good. Would you like to tell me the date today?" "I am not entirely sure. I never counted the days I was locked up by the rogues." Isaac spat the last few words out before sighing and lying back further into the bed. "That is fine. How old are you?" 22, he told him, and the doctor stared at him for a moment. "Okay. What is your last memory before you were taken?" Isaac thought for a moment before sighing. "I had brought my mate here when she dislocated her arm." "Okay." He wrote something down before looking up at him. "Physically, you are very healthy and on the mend, but mentally." He shook his head before he glanced down. You seem not to remember what happened in the last 21 years of your life. 21 years? Isaac muttered, and the doctor nodded as Lauren stood next to him. It is all right, Isaac. If there is anything, the door was thrown open, and a large man stood there glaring at everyone in the room before his eyes stopped on him. Welcome back, Alpha, he hissed before glaring at his mate and leaving. Chapter 12. Lauren's POV. I do not understand, her mate muttered before looking up at her. Who is that? Shaking her head, Lauren leaned down and kissed the top of his head. No one to worry about right now. What I need to worry about is getting you out of here and up into bed. He smiled at her before reaching for her hand, which rested on the side of his bed. Lauren, you saved me, and for that, I will never hurt you again. I know I treated you badly in the past, and you probably hate me for it, but pressing a finger to his lips, she smiled slightly. No, I am not angry, nor do I hate you. Yes, what you did hurt, but that was a long time ago. I know, Lauren, but to me it felt like it was just yesterday. Looking up at the doctor, he wrote something down before smiling at her. He is free to leave whenever he wishes. There is no physical damage, but mentally, he shook his head before leaving the room. Shuffle over, she muttered, and he did what she told him to do before she lay down next to him. I feel unsafe in my own territory, he muttered to her as he threw his arm around her shoulders. There is so much I should tell you, but I am scared of how you would react, she whispered to him, and he leaned down and kissed her hair lightly. You are my mate, Lauren. When you think I am ready, then I will be ready. Perhaps by telling me what happened after my memory disappears. Smiling lightly, she looked up at him. Well, afterwards, you let me eat with the girls again. I did. He sounded confused before smiling. I feel like a jerk. He told her, and she grinned before shrugging. You were. Sighing, she lay her head down on the pillow. There was a woman, she muttered, and he raised an eyebrow at her. A woman? This woman was not you. She shook her head, and he raised his spare hand up to his newly shaved head. Did I, He drifted off, and she shook her head. No, nothing happened like that. I was hurt, though. I am sorry. No, I am sorry. I did punch you in the face. There was silence in the room before he burst out laughing. You punched me in the face? He asked, astonished, and she nodded before his laughter died down into a chuckle. She watched him look around the room for a moment before grunting as he sat up. It has been a while since I have been the one sitting in the bed and not someone else, Isaac muttered to her. And I do not like it. Chuckling to herself, she got up from the bed. I will go grab you some clothes, and then I will be right back. Stay here. He nodded at her words as she left the room, smiling at him as she closed the door. She finally had her mate back, and she had never seen him so happy. Isaac's POV. Shuffling around in the bed, Isaac finally lay back and waited for his mate to return. The small TV played in the corner, and he slowly started to close his eyes again. He was tired, and he knew that he had not fully recovered. Perhaps not for another day yet, but his wolf was stirring inside of him, making him open his eyes as he started to growl at the intruder. There in the doorway was the boy from earlier. His hands clenched at his sides, and the anger showed on his face. Come back later, boy, he muttered to him, turning over on his side before being thrown back to face him. You really think you are fit to be alpha? He growled at him, making Isaac sit up. You are not worthy of the position, even with a mate. You dare? Clenching his jaw, his wolf growled at the boy in front of him viciously. How dare he insult him and his mate? And you think you are right to be alpha? I was taking his chance. Isaac threw himself at him, shifting midair. The boy was prepared and shifted as Isaac bit into his neck. His wolf was shorter than his, but not by much. Shaking him free, the boy clawed at his face while standing up on his hind legs. Isaac launched himself at him, tackling him into the wall and into the next room, where a woman screamed. Glancing up at them for a second, he saw a woman clutching a small bundle and her mate protectively holding them both. The sight made him instantly change back as the boy tried to recover from the smash through the wall. Change back, boy. I will not have anyone harming members of my pack. He stared at him for a second before shifting back as well. They are not part of your pack. They are part of my pack. When you died, it was handed to me. Isaac glared at him, but he instantly stiffened as he heard his mate's small voice from the doorway. Isaac, she whispered, making him and the boy turn their heads towards her, but her eyes were on the boy. How could you? She asked him. The boy instantly shut down and lowered his head. Lauren, Isaac spoke up from the silence. Her eyes slowly turned to his. This boy. I am not a boy, he barked at him, making Isaac glare at him before turning back to his mate. He told me that when I died, he became Alpha. How is that even possible? The only way that would happen is if he were my son. She stared at him for a moment before lowering her head and glancing up at the boy, giving him everything he needed to know. I found out I was pregnant a week after you went missing, she muttered before looking up at the small family. I am sorry for ruining such a beautiful moment, she apologized, making them smile and shake their heads. It is fine, Luna, the man said to the parents. We understand. His mate looked up at him. We should leave this new family alone. Both of you. She turned her head towards her, his son, who slowly nodded and walked out behind her. Walking over to her, Isaac tilted his head. I think you have some explaining to do, he muttered to her before following his newly found son. Chapter 13. Lauren's POV. What was I supposed to say, Isaac? Lauren asked him as she sat down beside him. He had recently put on fresh clothes and settled onto the couch. Hey, this is your son that you do not remember making, but that is cool because you now have everything you ever wanted. Her son let out a snort of laughter, and she turned to glare at him. Do not think you have been let off too easily either. How dare you attack your father? She snapped at him, and he raised an eyebrow at her before shrugging. What are you going to do, mother? I am not 12 anymore. I am a grown wolf. Shut up, she barked at him, making him shuffle back further into his armchair. Turning, she faced her mate. Talk to me, Isaac. You have been gone for 20 years. The least you can do is talk to me. There was silence before Isaac looked at her finally. What do you want me to say, Lauren? I have been here for 5 seconds, and this is getting a bit too much. She watched him shuffle before standing up and glancing around. I am going for a run. Do not come after me. Isaac hung his head and slowly left the living room. Turning around, she glared at her son. Is this what you wanted? She hissed at him, and he stared at her for a moment. Is this really what you wanted? Do you want me to be unhappy? Is that it? Thanks to you, my mate is now denying everything. Thanks to you, I will never have a chance to explain everything to him, and you will never become Alpha. Yes, that is right, I knew, but I seriously do not care anymore. She shouted at him. His stare hardened into a glare. Giving him one last glare, she left the room with a huff. Isaac's POV. We have everything we wanted. His wolf whispered to him as he continued to run through the forest. Things may have changed, but their mate had grown stronger and had given them a son to pass their title on to. He is not ready, Isaac muttered back to him, and he could feel his wolf nod his large head. Yes, but he has been Alpha for 4 years before we returned. He is not ready, and so we will train him. Isaac shook his head back at him mentally. He will not accept it. I can feel our land is less strong than it used to be, and he is the one who has brought it down like this. His wolf huffed in agreement as he neared a lake. The smell of a patrol was strong, and it was clear to him that they must have just passed through. Shifting back, he took a seat on the nearby fallen log and groaned before sticking his head in his hands. The sound of the creatures around him sounded wrong, almost as if they were in distress, and a shiver went down his spine. Everything here felt so weak and small. The sound of a cough brought him back to reality as he snapped his head up to see a man standing there. His dark hair was chopped short like every male in the pack except for a few. It is nice to meet you, Alpha. My name is Delos. I am Kent's son. Kent had a son? Isaac asked, surprised, and he nodded slowly. Do you not remember? You were there for my birth. I am sorry, Delos, but I do not remember very much before I was taken by rogues. Oh. He took a seat next to him. Isaac watched as he glanced around before smiling at him. You know you are one of my biggest heroes. Especially when I was younger, my dad told me all kinds of stories about you. I am not that great, Isaac muttered, and Delos snorted. Right. You are the only alpha to make us have alliances with the most powerful and dangerous in the world. If you are not a hero, then I do not know who is. Isaac could think of many other people who were bigger heroes than he was. Then something struck him. Are those alliances still intact? He asked him, and Delos shook his head. No. The treaties were ripped up as soon as your son took command of the pack. Let us just say he is not the best negotiator. That boy had destroyed his life's work. Growling angrily, Isaac lifted himself to his feet and stared down at him. It seems I have some work on my hands, he mumbled before shifting again and heading back to the pack house. Isaac, son, POV. Do you know how stupid you are? His mate muttered to him as she paced his room. Your mother risked her life for that man. She pretended to be a rogue, walked into a battlefield and killed everyone, and she still got back here safely. He does not deserve the position of alpha, he mumbled, and she snorted. Right, because you do? You're as selfish as he is, or was, or whatever. He shot up on his bed. I am selfish? He is the one who hurt my mother. And you are doing the same thing by denying him as your father. So suck it up and get over it. He is your father, and he is your alpha. He groaned and flopped back on his bed. Why does life have to be so complicated? He muttered, and she sighed before taking a seat next to him. Well, you are a werewolf for starters, she admitted. He smirked and placed his hands behind his head. And you are also the alpha son. Groaning, he muttered, do not remind me. She chuckled beside him. Look, you want to be alpha again, right? Nodding at his mate, she grinned. Well, there is only one way to do it. Get along with your father, suck up to him or whatever, and do everything he says to do, or you are never going to get your position back. And do you know where that position will go? Who? He asked, slightly amused by her spark of intelligence. Your son. Growling at her slightly, he pulled her down onto the bed and placed her beneath him. How did I end up with such a smart, sexy mate? He muttered, and she giggled beneath him as he placed a kiss on her lips. I do not know, but before we both get carried away, you need to go down and find your father, tell him you are sorry and whatever. Grinning, he placed a kiss on her forehead and shifted away from her and off the bed. All right. If this does not work, though, you have to mate with me tonight. End of discussion. All right, we will, and if it does work, you let me explain everything to you, and we do not mate until tomorrow night. Growling at her playfully, he headed over to the door. End of discussion, she shouted at him as he closed the door, making him chuckle. Finding his father was the easy part of it all. Of course, he was going to be in the office. He basically lived there before he was killed. Knocking on it, he heard an immediate reply from behind. Come in. It grunted, and he pushed open the door. His father was staring at 5 treaties, and he automatically regretted coming in. His eyes looked up at him with a hard glare, and he swallowed the lump in his throat. What do you want, boy? He spat, and Isaac tried, as gracefully as he could, to walk over to him. I wanted to talk to you. And I want to talk to you, he admitted, and Isaac's eyes widened in shock. You do? His voice squeaked a little before he coughed, and his father stared at him. You do, he asked again, and he nodded. Yes. About these. He turned the 5 pieces of paper around, and Isaac glanced over them, all of which had big red letters on them. Broken. The 6-letter word said it all, and by the look on his father's face, he was not pleased about it. Right about those, Isaac started, but his father instantly cut him off by raising his hand. You had a small job. Protect these treaties. That was all. I had basically set your life up for you. Why did you just stomp on it all? Throw away our pack's safety? Do you think this is a big game? Playing alpha? Of course not. Then how did you lose these treaties? Seriously, I want to know. Staring at him for a moment, Isaac knew he was angry, but he was not the I am going to rip your ass off in wolf form sort of angry. More of an I am disappointed in you kind of angry he got from his mother every once in a while when he was younger and did something stupid. They kept demanding more resources that I could not give them. They wanted me to raise more warriors so that they knew they were protected as well, and I could not. I could not lower the training age. I just could not. Burying his head in his hands, he heard his father sigh. And for the 267 pack members that decided to leave, they did not think I would be able to run a pack, obviously. Their safety was at stake because I took over the pack at 16. They did not believe that I could do it. Sighing at the end, he buried his head deeper into his hands. There was silence in the room, and he looked up. His father was flipping through the pages listing the pack members who had left, or whom he had let transfer out during his reign. He watched as his father scratched his head, and then glanced up at him. Encouragement, he said. Frowning, Isaac did not know what he meant. That is what the pack needed to get your numbers of warriors up. Encouragement. Sure, all werewolves have that fighting urge inside of them, but someone has to encourage them to actually use that urge to put it into something useful. There are probably a lot of teenage boys out there who are bored as hell and have the urge to fight, which they're slowly overcoming. Teenage wolves are lazy and usually need some encouragement to do something useful, which is why I normally visited the pack school around the age when they can start training. So you manipulated them into becoming warriors, he asked, and his father shook his head. No, encouraged. I gave them a brief course on what they would be doing, and they would decide whether they liked it. Most of the time, they liked it and continued on. Why are you telling me this? It is not as if I am going to be alpha, he stated, and his father stared at him long and hard before closing the large file. Do you believe that? Sure. Then you will not be alpha, he stated. What? You can leave now, he said, turning to his laptop. So you are not going to let me be alpha? He looked up at him and raised an eyebrow. You just admitted that you were not going to be alpha. You basically just gave up. Not a good trait that I would want you to keep. Frowning, Isaac stood up from the chair. You are not going to even give me a chance? Well, I was until you said you were not going to be alpha. Growling softly, he turned towards the door and grabbed the door handle. Opening it up, he looked over his shoulder at him. I will be here at 7 tomorrow morning, he growled at him. His father smirked at him and clasped his hands on the desk. That is more like it, he muttered before he turned to his laptop. Chapter 14. Lauren's POV. The sound of the door opening woke Lauren. Sitting up, she saw her maid appear in the room. He moved effortlessly around the room as he removed his clothing, but finally settled in his boxers. Lifting up the blanket beside her, he slid in and grinned up at her. Your son is a very interesting character, he mused as she lay down beside him. Well, I did raise him, and he is our son, she reminded him, making him chuckle and wrap his arms around her waist tightly so he could bring her closer. That he is, he mumbled as he nuzzled his head into her neck. Snuggling into his chest, she finally let out a sigh. You have no idea how much I missed you, she muttered as he placed a small kiss on the top of her head. I am sure if I remembered any of it, then I would have missed you just as badly, he mumbled, and she smiled, suddenly feeling tired. Sleep. It has been a long day, and tomorrow will be even longer. Grinning, she placed a single kiss on his bare chest before closing her eyes fully and drifting into darkness. Banging on their bedroom door woke her. She immediately sat up and rubbed her eyes as the door was thrown open, revealing her son. He was grinning happily, with Yasmine quietly following him. Good morning, mother, father. It seems that it is 7, and you are not in your office, father. Being alpha does not require you to get up at a certain time, her mate grumbled, turning over and clutching the pillow to the back of his head. Well, what about all the important stuff you have to show me today? If we want to get everything done, then we have to start now. Glancing down at her mate, she could hear him groan, and she knew he was annoyed. Suddenly, his head lifted, and he looked at her son. Jeans and a shirt like that will not do for what I have planned for you. When you are ready, then I will be. What? What does that mean? I thought you were going to teach me about being an alpha, and now you are complaining about my fashion sense. Isaac, Yasmine placed a hand on his shoulder, making him look down at her. I think he is taking you to do some physical work. There was silence in the room, and Isaac suddenly grunted and left, slamming the door behind him, leaving her bewildered and completely confused. "Okay, what do you have planned?" she asked her mate as he swung his legs over the edge of the bed. "Once he can get me down on the floor, he can learn the mental side of being an alpha. Isaac, I think he has that side covered. You are out of your youth in that area. Maybe try something else. I do not want you hurt." She heard him chuckle as he wandered over to the wardrobe where she had kept all of his clothes. "I think I am fine, love. Trust me. I was 15 when I brought down my father. If he has been trained by Kent, then he is nowhere near where he is supposed to be." Sighing, she collapsed back into the bed. Isaac's POV. Walking down to the training fields, Isaac could hear his son behind him. "You know I could take you down easily, right?" he stated to him. "I mean, you have been away for 20 years, and I have been training. Maybe we should start off with something not so physical, like paperwork." Rolling his eyes, Isaac flexed his neck as he entered the small training area. The dirt on the floor was exactly how he remembered it, and only a few men stood around sparring or punching at a punching bag. A few looked up at them. He could see their questioning looks when they saw him with their alpha, but right now, he was going to put this boy in his place. Placing his towel down on the bench, he cracked his knuckles and faced his son, who was stretching his arm muscles. "You know the rules?" he asked, and his son nodded. "You win this, and I will hand you the position straight away. No questions asked. If I win, you will have to continue training until I think you are ready." "All right," he smirked. "I take your deal." "You are going to regret your words, old man." Grunting, Isaac watched him lean down slightly and ball his hands into fists. Raising his hands up, he started circling him. "You know my mother basically died after you left. She basically killed herself every day." He could sense his son was trying to make him weak with his mate's pain, but seeing her that morning glowing with happiness reminded him that it was in the past. His son threw his fist out towards him, but Isaac easily dodged it. "I should thank your mate. She helped me back here. She was very helpful in getting me back here and in finding me water and food. A good little fighter." His son growled a little and Isaac smirked. Something Kent could never teach him: emotional block. One thing he could never teach his son. His son threw 2 more punches at him. Isaac easily blocked them by ducking and moving slightly to the left. Seeing him recover after the second one not quickly enough, Isaac threw in a punch, hitting him in the gut. There was no more talking after that. His son's full concentration was on him, trying to get at least 1 punch in. He had a lot of openings. His feet were sloppy, and Isaac started to get bored with the fight. Landing a punch on his shoulder, and then knocking him down with a sharp kick to his knee, his son was on the floor in seconds. His breathing came out hard, and Isaac stared down at him. Looking up at him, his son glared. "How did you do that?" he asked, panting. Tilting his head to the side, Isaac answered him. "Unlike you, I was not trained by Kent. I train myself most of the time, boy. Being alpha does not revolve around just taking care of a pack. If you cannot defend yourself in a fight, then how are you going to defend your own pack? There is always someone out there who is bigger and stronger than you. Now, if you excuse me, I believe you have some improvements to make here. I have a few calls to make and a pack meeting to prepare. But you are old. I have never been beaten by anyone before. Yes, well, today is your lucky day. Work on your feet, boy. They are horrendous." Isaac heard him grunt as he rose from the floor and continued to follow him inside. "You cannot be serious? I have been defending this pack since I was 16. You are not ready. Once you are ready physically, then I will consider mentally preparing you." "Consider," he barked out. "This pack does not know who you are." Whipping around, Isaac grabbed him by the throat. He was slightly taller than him, giving him the advantage to stare down at him. "This pack knows who I am just as much as they know who you are. You are my son, and I am your alpha. I have authority over you. You will not try to degrade me, nor will you try to command me, or I will never hand you my position. Got that, boy?" Isaac felt him swallow under his grasp and then nod before he let go of him. "Now I must go." Turning around, he forced himself to return to his study. Chapter 15. Isaac's son, POV. Rubbing my throat lightly, I sucked in a deep breath before turning around to see a slight crowd forming. What? I snapped at them all. Have you never fought with your father? They all grumbled a reply before moving away. Sighing, I turned around to see a young girl staring right at me. Her big doe eyes stared at me as if I were the scariest thing on the planet. Letting out a short breath, I crouched down in front of her. Where is your mother, little girl? She looked around behind me and then shrugged, clutching the small china doll to her chest as if it were her own child. Standing up, I reached down with my left hand and smiled lightly at her. Come on. Why do you not tell me where you last saw her? She placed her small hand in mine and pointed towards a group of ladies who were chatting away. Lauren's POV. Knocking on my mate's office door, I opened it slowly and stuck my head in. He was on the phone, chatting to someone, which made me frown. I shuffled into the office before closing the door softly behind me. He had a pen in his hand, and he scribbled down notes as the man on the other side of the phone rambled about something. Isaac stopped and frowned. Now, wait a moment. Do you not think you should come down here and see me before we even think about? He suddenly barked out a laugh and wrote something else down on the paper that was set on his desk. It is nice to see that you remember me after such a long time. Isaac chuckled and finally looked up at me. Of course not. I will be holding a meeting with all the alphas within a 2-day distance of my pack. Yes, I will be expecting you and your mate here. Thank you, Daniel. He hung up the phone and looked up at me. Do you know how weird it is to phone up people who are your friends, thinking it is a prank? Walking over to him, I took a seat on the arm of his chair and rubbed his arm soothingly. I mean, they know my voice, but they all think I am dead. I feel like someone has taken my life and twisted it around to leave me with a mess in the end. Hey, do not think like that. It is not your fault at all. Of course, it is not my fault. It is those damn rogues. He growled, slamming his hands down onto the desk before looking up at me and glaring hard. I cannot believe you thought I was dead. I frowned and shook my head. It was not my fault. Could you not feel the connection that we shared for the past 19 years? It was here, Lauren, and you ignored it. Isaac, you abandoned me to those rogues. I have no memory. Why? And I cannot get it back. Why? Because you could not. His head suddenly whipped to the side, and I frowned. Looking down at my hand, I realized it was in a tight fist. Looking back up at Isaac, I realized his hard glare was on me. Did you just punch me? He growled at me. I took a step away from him as he pushed his chair back. Did you just punch your own mate? He turned his head towards me and growled. How dare you? I could see his body shake as his wolf surfaced. He was angry, really angry. He was back to the Isaac I met when I was first here. His wolf finally took over, and he ripped apart the desk as he tried to get to me. Forcing myself to turn, I appeared in front of him, growling. He growled back, and the look in his eyes confused me. It was playful, but when he lunged for me, I was ready. Jumping to the side, I watched as he slammed himself into a bookcase. He got back up and shook his fur out before looking at me again and growling. I took off towards the study door, breaking the lock as I burst through it. I could hear my mate coming up behind me, and as he jumped on top of me, we went rolling towards the stairs, causing the marble to crack and leave a dent where my body hit it. Grabbing his leg between my teeth, I ripped his body from mine and bit into his neck, making him howl in pain. But he quickly grabbed my snout in his mouth and bit down. Not as hard as he would in a fight, but it still caused me pain. I felt someone rip us from each other, and I looked up to see Kent wrestling with Isaac as he tried to launch himself at me again. Looking behind me, I saw my son holding me back by my stomach with all his strength, but I was ready to go. When I saw Isaac starting to transform back, I did the same. As soon as he was fully in human form, he let out a howl of laughter as he stared at me with delight. You, Lauren, are one dangerous woman, he told me, giving me a wink. Frowning, he continued to grin at me. You have no idea how long I have wanted to test your strength since I met you. I am glad I left the pack in your hands while I was absent. He broke free from Kent and grabbed me around the waist before pulling me close to him and grinning like a Cheshire cat. You really are one amazing, dangerous woman. And then his lips were on mine. Chapter 16. Isaac's POV. Chuckling as I slid the fork into my mate's mouth, she giggled from the romantic gesture. She placed her hand down on mine, which had the fork in it, and swallowed. "You know we should go do something later," she whispered to me as a maid scurried past us. I grinned, thinking of many things we could do later, but then my smile fell, and I sighed. "I wish I could, but I have to arrange for the party tomorrow night, and I have to teach your son some theory." She leaned forward in her seat and grinned at me. "You are such a good father." She leaned forward, nuzzling her nose with mine before placing a soft kiss on my lips. I went to grab her stool, but we were forced apart by a deep growl. Looking up, I saw my son standing there, furious at the sight he had just witnessed. "Yes!" My son glared at me and rolled his shoulders back, noticing he was hunching over. "I believe you wanted to see me at this time." "Of course." Standing up from my seat, I brushed off the crumbs on my lap and pushed the cake towards Lauren. "You have the rest." She grinned at me and picked up the fork. "Are you trying to make me fat?" she asked as she stuffed a mouthful into her mouth, and I laughed. "Of course, darling." She chuckled as I left with my son trailing behind me. "I really do not like seeing you and my mother so intimate in the kitchen," my son growled at me, making me roll my eyes and look down at him. "I did not know you were in charge of me." "I am sorry for caring for my mate," I told him lazily as he growled again. Walking towards the library, I could hear my son's feet getting louder and louder as he started to drag his feet along the floor. "Why are we at the library?" "I thought we were going to practice." "We are. I just have to make sure of some things." I opened up the double doors and sat down on the old couch. It had been a while since I had been in here, but the scent was still the same. My son stared at me as I picked up a nearby book and flicked through it. "Who is the seventh beta of the pack?" I asked him randomly, and he frowned. "Beta Ender." "Wrong," I said, cutting him off. He crossed his arms, getting frustrated as he tried to rack his brain for the correct information. "Who is the 21st Delta?" I asked him, expecting the right answer, only to see him glare. "Who cares who the Deltas and Betas of the pack were? They are not important." "Who takes care of the warriors?" I asked him, expecting the right answer. "The Alpha, of course." "No, the Beta does." "Do you know what a Delta does?" "He does most of the paperwork." He trailed off, realizing what a horrible mistake he had made. "No. He is the man in charge of making sure that every family in the pack is well looked after, from food to furniture." "Now, what does an Alpha do?" There was no reply from my son, so I continued. "They're there to protect the pack. They pass every command from their warriors, and they're the ones who do the paperwork. Not the Deltas or Betas." "So, if that was what you were doing." "I did not have a Delta," my son mumbled. I was silent. Anger boiled inside of me, and I clenched the book in my hands, but not enough to cause damage. "No Delta." "I let Delos do all of the family stuff," my son grumbled, making me growl. "You selfish little," throwing the book down, I marched over to the bookcase and pulled out book after book from the shelf and threw them down on the table in front of my son. "Before you even think of doing combat again, you need to read every one of these books," I said, grabbing the two on the top of the stack. "And then once you have done that, you need to read all of these on the past of our pack." I placed my hand on the other stack of 3 books. They were at least 700 pages long, maybe longer, but if this was what I had to make my son do to learn, then so be it. "You are not allowed to leave here until I get you." My son looked up at me and frowned. "But, be quiet and start reading." My son growled at me and grabbed the first combat book. "I am not a little kid." "Well, it seems you are acting like one," I shouted back at him, making my son growl once again as I stormed out the door to start the plans for tonight. Isaac, son, POV. Growling as I grabbed the first book, I flipped it open to the first page. It was covered in a unique pattern, and I frowned as I ran my hand over it before opening to the first page. This book teaches you the rules of combat. The rules and techniques you will learn throughout the book will teach you all you need to know about combat. I already knew everything about combat. I had fought rogues before. They could not be much different from anything else. Why my father was making me read this was pointless since I already knew it all. Skipping through the first page, I came to the first rule. Rule number 1. Focus. Focus is the #1 rule in combat. Your mind needs to multitask while you are fighting another wolf by making sure you are aware of your surroundings while you are fighting. You cannot let your mind drift off to thinking of your mate because your opponent will strike at your disadvantage and kill you instantly. My eyebrows instantly shot up. How could they put this into words? It was hard for a wolf not to think about their mate while they were in wolf form or in their human form. It was what they needed to stay grounded, and it confused me that you could not think about them. Perhaps there was something to learn from these books. Chapter 17. Isaac's Son, POV. I stared at the words on the page, trying to absorb as much as I possibly could from the last few words in the book. Sighing, I finally put the book down and stared at the stack of family history I was yet to touch. Grabbing the largest book from the bottom of the pile, I flipped open the cover. The paper felt like it was over 100 years old, and I carefully turned the page. A drawing of a man was on the first page. A young lady stood behind him, and from what I could tell, they were mates. The age difference between the two was significant, and I let out a low whistle. Reading the small writing under the picture, I could hardly believe what I saw. Alpha Dominic, 197 years old, Luna Tiara, 19 years old. He had waited for his mate for so long. Everyone knew that once you reached the age of 21, your body clock stopped, so you did not grow older but stayed the same until you found your mate. I felt sorry for him, waiting all that time to find his mate. Looking underneath them, I saw the description someone had written. Alpha Dominic was the first alpha of our pack. He first started this pack when he was 19 with his brother, who was later killed by vampires. After 178 years, he finally came across his mate when she transferred into his pack. They had 2 sons, Marcus and William, who took over the roles of Delta and Beta as they grew up. Jesus Christ, I thought as I ran my hands through my hair and flipped to the next page. Slumping back into the chair, I flipped over the page. My father's picture was plastered onto the page, and I suddenly sprang back to life. Leaning forward, I saw my mother wrapped protectively in his arms, but a slight smile played on both of their lips. Alpha Isaac, 22 years old, Luna Lauren, 19 years old. Alpha Isaac was the first alpha to ever challenge his father for the position, and he was the youngest alpha to ever take over the pack at the age of 16. The alpha was also the first to secure 5 treaties within the first 5 years of becoming alpha, making him one of the most powerful alphas of our pack. His mate, Luna Lauren, was found in the pack after she was forced to leave her own pack. She also possessed a very unique and strong wolf. After a rogue attack on the pack, Alpha Isaac went missing, suspected dead. They only had 1 child, Isaac. Now we were getting to the good stuff. Grinning, I flipped over the page to find nothing, only blank pieces of paper. Growling lightly to myself, I whipped my head around to see my father standing there. Wondering why you are not in there, he asked before taking a seat next to me. I was Alpha once, too. Why am I not in here? I argued, and he sighed. Because all you accomplished while you were Alpha was failure. You did not prove yourself to the pack in any way. There are only 3 Alphas in here that have done evil things to this pack. The worst one was Alpha Paul. He harmed all of his handmaids and killed several children. Who writes all of this? I mean, it is not like you write it yourself. He snorted and rolled his eyes. Of course not. The Alpha before you writes it. My father wrote it as I will write yours. So those men had children? The evil ones, I mean. They found their mates, and they had children, he said with a shrug, like it was no big deal, and I shook my head. I mean, how could they write such good things about their sons? I would have thought it would have been hard for them to actually write anything good about them instead of thinking that they were a disgrace. My father shrugged, not really knowing the answer. Maybe they realized that they were idiots or someone else wrote it, probably a pack elder at the time. There was a knock on the door behind him, and we both turned to look who it was. Yasmine stood there awkwardly, and I smiled at her. Hey, I said as she closed the door behind her and stared at the 2 of us. What is up? I asked as I set the book down on the table. She glanced at my father for a second before looking back at me. I was wondering if I could talk to you for a second. Yes, of course. You do not have to ask that. I had not seen Yasmine very much over the past few days. It was almost like she had been hiding. My father smiled at us before he left the room. Patting the seat next to me, she sat down and turned to me. There was silence for a while before she spoke. "I think I should leave," she said. I frowned and moved myself on the couch so I could face her more. "Leave? You want to leave?" She nodded lightly as she stared down at her hands, which rested in her lap. "Why? Is there something about being a rogue that you love? Please tell me that you are not one of those rogues who will never return to pack life." "No, it is not that. She trailed off, and I placed my hands on her cheeks and forced her to look at me. "Is there something about being in a pack that you do not like? Because I promise you it is so much better than being a rogue." "I do not want to be a rogue," she said, pulling away from me and staring me right in the eyes. "I just do not want to be a Luna." I frowned. "Not a Luna?" She was born to be a leader. "So you're rejecting me because you do not want to be Luna?" "I am not rejecting you. I know I am not fit for the role of Luna. There are so many other she-wolves that are perfect for the role. But none of them is you," I said softly to her. "Look, Yasmine. You may not be like my mother, and that is perfect. What you bring to the table will be what the pack needs in the end. My grandmother was the perfect Luna. She spoke well in public and was always ready to fight. My mother could not even shift until she realized that my father was gone. She was terrified. Fate would not have put us together if you did not fill every box that needs to be filled." I leaned forward and kissed her forehead before pulling away and looking at her. "And if you are scared, I am here for you," I confirmed, and she smiled at me before nodding. Chapter 18. Lauren's POV. I glanced down at the large cake in front of me. One of the cooks was putting frosting on it, and I smiled, pleased at what she was making. I heard the kitchen doors quietly open and then close as someone tried to sneak in. "Touch those brownies, and you will be punished," I snapped at my mate as his scent reached my nose. I heard him chuckle from across the room, and I turned around. "I am pretty sure you cannot punish your alpha, Lauren. That goes against all authorities." Rolling my eyes, I pushed myself off the bench behind me and walked over to him as he studied me carefully. "And you seem to have forgotten that I am your Luna, giving me a title over you. You may control the pack, Alpha Isaac," I teased as I put a hand on his chest. "But I control you." Standing up on my toes, I kissed him lightly before stepping away from him completely. "Now get out of the kitchen. The other alphas will be arriving soon, and someone has to greet them while I get the main hall ready." "Is that cake for me?" he asked, glancing over at it, and I smirked. "It is for everyone, but if you are lucky, I will give you an extra piece. Now go on." He grinned down at me and kissed the top of my head before leaving. Turning back to the cook, I could tell she was focused on her work, and I smiled at her. "Mary." She looked up at me instantly. "I am going to check to see if everything is okay in the main dining hall," I said, taking off my apron and laying it on the counter. "Can you handle everything here?" "Of course, Luna. I will call in one of the other cooks if I get into any trouble." "Thank you, Mary." Walking through the door off to the left of the kitchen, I entered the dining room. 20 years ago, this used to be the male dining room, but since the attack, and it being one of the rooms that had been completely demolished, we had it rebuilt and enlarged to suit a lot more people, meaning that there was no need for the ladies' dining room, and it was turned into a nursery. The last of the plates was being put down on the table, ready for the alphas and their Lunas. Some of them were bringing their children since some were too young to be away from their parents or old enough to start learning the way of being an alpha. Leaving the maids to finish up, I left to go out into the foyer. My mate was already greeting guests at the door, and at least 10 alphas were already in the foyer waiting. "Lauren." A voice called me, and I turned to see Dominic. Grinning, I gave him a short hug before pulling back. "What are you doing here?" "I heard you handed your position over to your son." Dominic rolled his eyes and looked over towards a young boy who could not be any older than 17. "He wishes. Unfortunately, I do not think he is ready, and I do not think he will ever be." "Do not say that, Dominic. I am sure he is ready. Physically, yes, but mentally, I do not know if he could ever handle the stresses of the pack. I am thinking that my other son may be a better choice." He nodded to the younger boy who was standing next to his older brother. "He is only 16, but I think he would be a better choice. Patting his arm lightly, I glanced at his two boys, who had started to get into a heated conversation. Oddly, the younger one seemed to be more controlled than the older one, who looked like he could turn in my foyer at any moment. "If he turns, I will throw you all out," I told him as he sighed and marched over to the couple. Heading over to my mate, I rested a hand on his forearm, making him look down at me and smile. "What is wrong? How many more?" I asked him, and he looked around the foyer before looking down at me again. "One, I think, but when he gets here, he can come straight in." "No mate?" I questioned, and he shook his head. "He will be the oldest alpha here. 234 years old. Yikes." He chuckled at my answer as he headed over to the steps to get some elevation against the crowd. He cleared his throat, and everyone's eyes turned to him. "Good evening, gentlemen and mates. I know what you are thinking. Is this man real? Surely he cannot be. He is dead." The crowd chuckled slightly when Isaac grinned. "Well, sorry boys. I am not. You are going to have to put up with me for a while longer, thanks to my mate who saved me before I was beheaded by rogues." Heads turned to face me, and I slightly blushed as they turned their attention to me. "I am sure a lot of you are hungry. Why don't we make our way to the dining room so the feast can begin?" My mate shouted into the crowd, and everyone started moving towards the dining room. As the crowd shifted, a hand was placed on my shoulder, making me swivel around to face a man who looked like he was in his late 20s. "That was very brave of you," he commented to me, and I smiled at him. "Thank you." "No, Luna, I do not think you understand how brave it is for you to go after your mate. I have seen this happen many times. Can I see the note?" I frowned at him. "The note? How did he even know about that?" "How did you?" "I have seen it many times before. A note is passed out to the Luna. The Luna never believes it, and the Alpha is killed, but you believed it even after you felt the loss of connection." He stared at me for a moment before asking, "Now I ask you again. Can I see the note?" I was quiet for a second before nodding and looking over to see Isaac by the door waiting for me. "I will be there soon," I told him, and he nodded before looking at the man. "Alpha Cedric, it is nice to see you again. And you too." They both passed a look before Isaac disappeared into the dining room. Biting down on my lip, I decided to lead him up the stairs and towards my bedroom. "Do you have a mate?" I asked him, and he grunted behind me. "No. I have waited too long for my mate. If she is in hiding, then she is the one who may not have a mate." I looked back at him and frowned. "How old are you?" He looked past me for a moment before sighing. "I am 259 years old." Biting down on my cheek, I turned back to look at him again. "You are older than what Isaac told me." I would not be surprised. Not many people know my exact age except my betas when they come into office. "How many have you had?" I asked him, and he sighed as he came up beside me. "I have had 7 different alphas and 11 different deltas." He looked down at me. His eyes held history, and there was no way I could understand what he had seen as he watched the members of his pack, his friends, grow old and die while he was left in a standstill. "Oh, I am sorry to hear that." "It is fine, Luna Lauren. It is the price I must pay for my mate's ignorance. I am sure you will find her." "I doubt that tremendously. She is probably dead." Deciding not to ask any more questions, I opened up my bedroom door. He casually followed me inside, and I walked over to the bedside table and opened up the drawer beside it. "I do not understand why you would need this, Alpha Cedric. It does not give much information. It is important for my investigation." He interrupted me again. He seemed to have a habit of that, and it made me want to tell him to shut up. I pulled out the slip of paper and passed it to him. He stared at it for a moment before bringing it to his nose and sniffing it. I had seen that a few times. When people were trying to track something, they sniffed it. It did not matter how old it was, there was still a scent on it from the original owner. I saw something in his eyes sparkle, and he breathed in more deeply before looking at me. "Who gave this to you?" "I do not know." "Where were you given this?" He barked at me, and I frowned. "It was slipped under the door to the dining room one day. I do not know who gave it to me, I swear." He growled lowly and shoved the paper into his pocket. "She has done it again. Slips right through my fingers." "She?" I asked him, and he stared at me for a moment. When I started looking for my mate, I received the same note from a nearby alpha whose mate had been taken by rogues, just like yours. When I first saw it, I was thinking it was ridiculous, but when I smelled it to see if there was any trace of anything on it, there was my mate's scent. It is the most annoying thing ever. She is like a little runaway from somewhere. He growled again before turning around and starting to walk towards the doorway. Enough of me, I believe you have a feast to hold. Swallowing, I nodded and led him down to the dining room. Chapter 19. Isaac's son, POV. I glanced over at my father as I chewed on my lamb. He was mumbling something into my mother's ear, which was making her blush. A soft hand was placed on my arm, and I looked at my mate, who was slowly looking me over to make sure I was okay. Isaac. She muttered, and I fully turned to her. Yes, Yasmine. You should stop feeling so much hatred towards your father. She whispered to me, and I frowned. You know what he did wrong to my mother. But you also know what he did to my mother. Does wrong always overpower right? I did not speak, only turned back to my meal. The truth was, I had gotten over what he did to my mother. I hated him because he was alpha and I was not. You are being selfish. She hissed at me. There is no doubt that he will give you the position, and yet you still despise him, even though he has not done anything towards you but make you study so you can become a better alpha than you were. Is that such a crime? I stood up, not being able to take much more of my mate's words. Excuse me, I muttered and walked out of the hall. As soon as my feet hit the marble, I heard footsteps behind me. Yasmine, I do not want to talk. I am surprised you do not even know what your own mate's footsteps sound like. My father mused from behind me, and I turned to face him. What? I asked him, and he raised an eyebrow at my attitude before crossing his arms over his chest. So it seems I know the reason why you hate me, for starters. He confirmed, and I growled before walking towards the library. Isaac, you should not walk away from your alpha. My father called after me as I kept walking away, but he grabbed my arm and turned me around. How about we make a deal? He told me, and I frowned at him. A deal? I asked, and he nodded. I missed out on the first 20 years of your life, and I am sorry. I would also like to remind you that you are not the only one who is getting tired of the alpha role. I do not want to be alpha for much longer than a year. I just want grandkids who will not hate me because you do so. Here is the deal. You marry your mate, and I will give you the pack. No training or anything required. You mean I could be alpha tomorrow? I asked, and he chuckled and shook his head. 1 year. That is all I need to be able to get the pack back on its feet, and I will guarantee that if you marry your mate in that required time, then I will hand over the pack to you, no problem. I was quiet for a moment before sticking out my hand. Deal, I said, and he grinned at me. A deal it is. He mused before shaking my hand and then leaving me to go back to the feast. Chapter 20. Yasmine's POV. So I do not actually have to take part in training if I do not want to? I asked Lauren, and she shook her head while looking into the pot of soup. I never did. No one is going to judge you for not taking part. I nodded my head and scrunched up my face in thought as Lauren continued to walk down the hall towards the infirmary. What about pack meetings? Do I have to sit up on the stage? I asked her. She sighed and stopped walking before turning to me. That will be necessary once you become Luna, but for now, if you do not feel comfortable with it, then you may sit amongst the pack. She studied me for a moment before crossing her arms. I feel like you have another question to ask me. I clasped my hands together in front of me. What if I do not want to become Luna? I stuttered, and she raised an eyebrow at me. I mean, you are a great Luna. Look what you are doing right now. You are going to the infirmary to greet a new member of the pack. I do not even know how to speak to a maid, let alone a newborn pack member. I do not know the rituals. I have not been in a pack for a long time, and you are a great Luna. Whoa, calm down, she said, holding her hands out towards me. I know this is a lot for you to handle, Lauren spoke as she placed her hands on my shoulders. But you are made for the role. You are not going to become Luna tomorrow or next week. Maybe in a few years, yes, but for now I will teach you how to greet everyone, how to recite rituals, and how to act in front of pack members, okay? Just calm down. I blew out the breath I had not even realized I had been holding and followed her as she turned back around and started down the hallway. "Just watch what I do and you will be fine," she said to me as she finally stopped at a wooden door and knocked on it. A tall man opened it and smiled at us. "Come in," he whispered quietly. He was not as big as most of the other men in the pack, making him look much kinder and warmer. I smiled kindly at him as I followed Lauren into the room. "What is his name?" Lauren asked, and she took a seat on the bed beside the lady who was cradling a small bundle in her arms. "Joseph," she murmured back to her Luna, and she passed the small bundle of blankets into her Luna's arms. "He is quite small," she whispered to her pack member, and she rocked the small creature slowly in her arms. "But he will grow to become a great tracker." My Luna looked up from the small bundle and at his mother with a smile. There is no doubt that a tracker is one of the most important members of the pack, as they are the ones who will inform us of where an enemy is. He will develop a keen sense of smell and know exactly when dinner is ready. Everyone in the room chuckled, and she smiled. "Welcome to the pack, Joseph Fallon," she whispered to the small, innocent bundle which wriggled in her grasp, wanting his mother's touch back. Knowing instantly what the baby wanted, Lauren handed the baby back to his mother and smiled at the small family. "Congratulations on your new arrival," she said with a wide smile as she stood up. "Unfortunately, I cannot stay any longer. I must teach our future Luna, who will definitely be welcoming your other pups into the world and the pack." She bowed her head at her pack members before ushering me out the door and closing it quietly. "So that was you welcoming a new pack member?" She nodded, and I smiled. "Well, good to know it is not that hard. Guess a position in the pack, tell them what it is, and then crack a joke." I told them the exact position of what the baby will be having. She told me truthfully, and I frowned. "How do you know that?" "There are certain features of a baby which can tell you what position they will have. Trackers will have wider nostrils than normal babies. Wolves that patrol or serve as messengers will have longer faces, which makes them more streamlined so they can run faster, and warriors will have larger, chubbier faces. It is something you pick up on as you continue to learn about being a Luna." I huffed a bit and crossed my arms. It seems hard once you go into depth about it. From what my Luna did in my old pack before I was kicked out, all you had to do was stand there and look pretty while you pumped out pups for your mate. Lauren barked out a laugh and shook her head. "Someone did not pay attention during school," she teased, and I shrugged. "There is a lot more to being a Luna than what the pack sees." "Yasmine." A voice called for me, and I turned around. Seeing my mate running towards me with a large grin on his face made me cautious. "Yasmine, I have great news," he said as he lifted me from the ground and spun me around in a circle. Whoa. Put me down before I vomit." I laughed as he finally set me on my feet with that large grin still plastered on his face. "Okay," I said as I brushed down my clothes and looked up at him. "What?" "My father just made a deal with me." I sighed. At least they were semi-talking. "What is it?" "If you do double the training, you get the title in 2 years." His mum interrupted, and he gave her a sideways glance before turning back to me. "No." He agreed that if I marry you within this year, I will become alpha, no training required. There was silence among the three of us before his mother suddenly growled loudly and stormed off down the hall. I pushed away from Isaac and looked up at him. "Are you crazy?" I screeched, and he frowned. "What? I know nothing of being a Luna, and you expect me to become one in a year?" "My mother will teach you everything." "And who will teach you?" I asked him, and he frowned. "What do you mean?" he asked as he cocked his head to the side. "I only just learned today that a Luna does not just stand there and look pretty. There is more to it." "Well, of course. So is there not more to being an alpha than just being able to punch someone really hard?" "So, is this a no, you will not marry me?" I scoffed and turned away from him as he called my name. Chapter 21. Yasmine's POV. The feeling of the bed dropping beside me made me crack my eyes open before I rolled over to face the opposite wall. I knew who it was, and I was in no mood to talk to him. I felt the shuffling of clothes, then the sheets being pulled back before they were comfortably placed around me once more, along with a new set of arms. I know you are angry at me, I heard him mutter in my ear as he nuzzled into my neck, making me shiver in delight. But I promise that everything I do is for the best of us. I pulled away from him, and I heard him sigh. Fine. You want to be like that, then be difficult. He grumbled under his breath, and I sat up and glared down at him. You are such a dick, I growled at him as I jumped from the bed. Why did I even mate with you? Throwing my arms up in annoyance, I watched as he sat up and leaned against the headboard of the bed. You regret mating with me? He asked, and I turned away from him to look into the mirror in front of me. In the darkness of the room, I could only just make out his figure on the bed as I ran my hands over the marble of the dresser beside it. No, I just regret mating with you so soon. I should have let you sort your life out before even thinking about any of this. Hey, it is fine, he said as he came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. You did not know about any of this when we decided to mate, and we did it on instinct. Your mother waited, I told him, trailing off slightly, and he pulled away. My father was a monster. No wonder she would not mate with him. He laughed before he sat back on the bed. He is not a monster, I said as I turned back to him. He looked up at me and raised an eyebrow. He sacrificed his life for his pack and everyone in it. He saved everyone in this pack. He hurt my mother, he growled before he snapped his eyes to mine. Why are you sticking up for him? He has been nothing but nice to me. So, should you not be loyal to your mate? He is disgusting. He has no memory of anything past that point, and he does not even remember mating with your mother for the first time. You do not know how horrible that feels, but it must be agonizing. He cannot even remember making his own son, and you seem to be blind to everything that he has done right for your mother. I turned towards the door, and just as I opened it, I spoke again. And you are just like him in every way. Even though you have not hurt me physically, you are selfish and need to grow up. Isaac, son, POV. Walking around the library seemed more pleasant than usual. I plucked books from the shelf and looked down at them. It was an old novel that one of the Alpha's brothers had written. I had read it before. It was about living in the shadow of his older brother, and at this moment, I knew exactly how he felt. I had been living in my father's shadow since I had taken the Alpha role. Growling, I shoved the book back into the bookcase roughly. Bad sleep. I jerked my head to the side at the voice. Kent stood there with a raised eyebrow and a curious gaze. Are you here to criticize my every move, or are you here to give me a deal that I will never be able to uphold? Kent gazed over me for a moment before he leaned against the large bookcase. Neither. I sighed and sat down on the nearby sofa and ran a hand through my hair. I am just here to check out some books for my son. Your son? I asked, and he nodded with a chuckle. Why? Even he has to research the history. Sure, he can fight, and he has even beaten his old man, but he still has a lot to learn here, such as how to keep his alpha happy when he is clearly acting like a child. I snapped my head up at the remark and narrowed my eyes at him. What? Kent shrugged his shoulders before he straightened up and walked over to me. Have you heard the story about the alpha who led his pack into the ground? I looked up at him and frowned. Maybe you have heard of the pack. Gordon Rock. I racked my brain trying to find a name to match some information, but I came up empty. I looked up at the old man and shook my head. He chuckled and sat down on the arm of the chair. Of course you have not. You have forgotten to take your history lessons. Back to the story, old man. I urged, and Kent crossed his arms in front of his chest as he began. The Alpha's name was William Gordon. His father, Oliver, had died in battle many years before, and when William turned 16, he took over the pack, thinking he was ready for the challenge, as he was stronger than the most trained warrior in the pack, and yet he would not listen to his elders. They gave him books and wisdom to carry him into his first few years of leading the pack, but he did not listen. He thought books were useless bits of trees that had no need to be made into paper and into books. He never read them. He never read about the long-standing hatred between his pack and the Sanderman pack, and he did not know they had been at peace for hundreds of years because his pack had been providing them with resources and patrolling their western border. When Alpha William cut off the supplies and restricted any patrol member from setting foot near their border, all hell broke loose around him. He was attacked, and he had no allies to send help, as he had lost them to the weak warriors he was producing. His nearest ally that he managed to keep was his cousin's pack, but they were hundreds of miles away from them, and it would take weeks before they reached them, meaning that he had no help, and he knew that he led his pack into his downfall. He was killed 2 days into the war. The war lasted for 2 weeks after his death. The Sanderman pack now has a claim to every inch of what used to be William's land. They took pity on the citizens who lived in those parts, and the Alpha, Godric at the time, protected them and even allowed the oldest warriors to live. Throughout the battle, he only killed 2 people. The Alpha and his Luna, as his warriors, were on strict orders to only take prisoners and kill no one. Kent cleared his throat and looked back up at me. Have you learned your lesson, young Alpha? Have you done any research on past wars or about your ancestors and who they were related to? A little, but a little. He barked in laughter. A little reading did not stop a war, Isaac. Learning their weaknesses and what they have used in the past has taught. Then how come my father was able to be dragged away even if he had done a lot of reading? Kent raised his eyebrow at the question and sighed. Rogues are hard to predict. Even the strongest Alpha cannot fight away a group of that size. It was unusually big even for a pack of rogues like that, but their leader is dead now, meaning that you can go back to studying and your father can go back to doing what he does best. Fixing things. I sighed at the thought of my father having to clean up the mess I had caused. I did not do that bad a job, did I? I asked the old man truthfully. He got up from the couch and let out a loud breath. Take it this way. If you were Alpha for 3 more years, there would not be an Alpha anymore. I froze in my spot and watched him walk away. What did he mean there would not be an Alpha? Was my pack planning on throwing a rebellion against me, or were they just going to leave? I sank into the seat, thinking about the pack. Was I that hated? Chapter 22. Isaac's son, POV. I slammed the library door behind me harder than I intended. The sound echoed through the empty halls. My father's deal still rang in my ears. Marry Yasmine in a year, and the pack was mine. No more training. No more books that made my head spin with centuries of history I had ignored. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it tasted bitter. Yasmine's words from earlier cut deeper than any punch. You are just like him. Selfish. I was not. I had kept the pack together after believing my father was dead. I had made hard choices. Yet here I was, watching him stroll back into the dining hall as if he had never left, charming every Alpha with stories of old treaties while my mother glowed beside him. I found Yasmine in the gardens, sitting on a stone bench under the moonlight. Her light brown hair caught the silver light, making her look softer than the fierce rogue I had first met. She did not look up when I approached. You ran out on me, she said quietly. I needed air. I sat beside her, careful not to touch. My father offered me the pack if we marry within the year. Her head snapped up. And you agreed without asking me? It is what we both want, is it not? You as Luna, me as Alpha. No more waiting. She stood abruptly, wrapping her arms around herself. I do not know how to be Luna, Isaac. Your mother makes it look easy, but I am not her. I was rogue for months. I chased squirrels and jumped rivers. What if I embarrass the pack? What if I embarrass you? I reached for her hand, pulling her back down. You will not. You already helped my mother on the journey north. You kept me calm when I wanted to rip my father's throat out. That is Luna's strength. I brushed a strand of hair from her face. And if I am honest, I am scared too. He is better at this than I ever was. But I do not want to be like the Alphas in those books who failed because they refused to learn. Yasmine searched my eyes. Then learn with me. Not because of a deal, but because we want to be better together. I nodded, the weight on my chest easing. Together. We sat in silence until the sounds of the feast faded. For the first time, the future did not feel like a battlefield. Lauren's POV. The argument started in the study the next morning. Isaac, my mate, stood behind the desk with maps and old treaties spread before him. Our son leaned against the wall, arms crossed, jaw tight. You cannot just hand me the pack after 1 year and expect everything fixed, our son growled. I am not. I am giving you time to prove you are ready, my mate replied calmly, though I saw the tension in his shoulders. You lost 5 treaties and members because you refused guidance. I am offering it now. You think I am weak because I am not you? No, my mate's voice softened. I think you are young. I was 16 when I took over and made mistakes too. But I had my father's shadow to learn from. You had my absence. I stepped between them, placing a hand on each chest. The familiar sparks from my mate grounded me. Enough. Both of you are more alike than you admit. Stubborn. Protective. You both love this pack. Our son looked away. He hurt you, Mom. For years. My mate flinched. I do not remember that pain, but I feel the weight of it in your eyes. I am sorry, son. If I could take it back, I would. But I am here now. Let me help rebuild what was lost. Silence stretched. Finally, our son exhaled. Fine. But not because of any deal. Because Mom deserves peace. My mate nodded, a small smile breaking through. Start with the books. Then we train. Together. I watched them shake hands, awkward and tense but real. Tears pricked my eyes. The bond between father and son, fractured for so long, was finally mending. Later that night, as my mate pulled me close in our bed, he whispered, "Thank you for never giving up on me." I kissed him deeply, the incomplete mating bond humming between us. Never. Isaac's POV. The full moon hung heavy over the packlands as we gathered in the clearing. The remaining alphas had stayed for the ceremony, witnesses to the restoration of order. Lauren stood before me, radiant in a simple white dress, her eyes shining with years of waiting. The rogue threat had been neutralized days earlier. A coordinated hunt with allied packs had ended the vampire-led remnants in Craven's forest. No more notes. No more shadows. I remember fragments now, I told her softly, taking her hands. Your voice is calling me. The way you fought for me, even when I was lost. She smiled through tears. You were never a monster to me. Just lost. Our son stood nearby with Yasmine, his arm around her. He had proposed properly that morning, no deals, just honest words. She had accepted, her nerves easing under Lauren's gentle guidance. I pulled Lauren against me. The mating bond flared as our wolves surged forward. We shifted together under the moon, our howls joining the pack's chorus. When we returned to human form, the bond snapped fully into place, warm, unbreakable, and complete. Sparks became a steady flame. Pain from the past dissolved into healing. I marked her again, gently this time, as she marked me. The pack cheered, our son leading the applause with Yasmine beaming beside him. You are home, Lauren whispered. I never truly left, I replied, kissing her with all the love I had regained and more. Lauren's POV. 1 year later, the pack house buzzed with life. Our son stood tall as Alpha, Yasmine radiant at his side as Luna. She had grown into the role beautifully, welcoming new pups with the same warmth I once struggled to find and organizing patrols with quiet confidence. My mate had stepped back gracefully, mentoring rather than ruling. I watched from the porch as our grandson toddled across the grass, chasing butterflies under his father's watchful eye. Isaac, my mate, slipped an arm around my waist, pulling me close. The bond feels stronger every day, he murmured, nuzzling my neck. Because we earned it. I leaned into him. The years of darkness were now a distant memory. Our son approached, Yasmine's hand in his. Dad, thank you. For the year. For teaching me what alpha being really means, protecting, listening, growing. My mate clasped his shoulder. You have made me proud, son. Both of you. Yasmine smiled shyly. And thank you, Luna Lauren, for showing me the heart of it all. Tears welled as the pack gathered. Kent with his family, Delos laughing with the warriors, new alliances strengthened. The rogue journey that started it all had led us here, healed, united and whole. As the sun set, my mate kissed me softly under the same moon that had witnessed our bond's renewal. Forever, Lauren. Forever, I whispered back. The pack howled in celebration, and for the first time in decades, every heart beat in harmony. And so, under the watchful eyes of the moon and the unbreakable bonds of family and fate, the pack thrived, whole, loved, and forever saved.
In Luna's rescue, Lauren, the grieving Luna of a werewolf pack, has spent 5 years isolated in self-pity after a devastating attack that supposedly killed her mate. When an anonymous note hints he may still be alive, she secretly leaves her son Isaac, the reluctant young alpha, to journey north disguised as a rogue, joining a ragtag group of young wolves heading into unknown danger. Meanwhile, Isaac must grapple with pack leadership, his simmering resentment toward his late father's legacy, and the sudden vacuum left by his mother's disappearance, forcing him to confront what kind of alpha and man he truly wants to become. Moral lessons learned. The traits we most despise in a parent are often the very ones we unconsciously embody. True maturity arrives only when we stop rejecting the reflection and start integrating what it shows us about ourselves. In this story, Isaac physically mirrors his father in eyes, hair, build, and explosive anger. When Lauren tells him, "You and your father are much more alike than you thought," he growls and slams the door, denying it. His grandmother later forces the mirror wider. She reminds him his father upheld historic treaties and protected other packs with his life, feats Isaac has not matched, while pointing out Isaac's own pattern of losing pack members. Psychologically, this exposes how intergenerational trauma operates through unconscious identification rather than conscious choice. Philosophically, it dismantles the comforting myth of the self-made person and reveals identity as a continual negotiation with inherited shadow. In our society or world today, firstly, when you feel irrational rage or judgment toward a parent figure, pause and journal the exact behavior. Then ask, where am I doing the same thing? Secondly, in family or work conflicts, deliberately recall one positive legacy from the person you resent and name one way you already carry it. Thirdly, use that awareness in your next difficult conversation instead of denial, turning potential explosion into conscious choice. Second moral. Sometimes the most radical act of self-rescue is obeying a private conviction that everyone else, logic, family, and social proof has already declared impossible. Still in this story, after 5 years of depression, Lauren acts on a single anonymous note and her unshakable heart, feeling that her mate lives. Despite Isaac's repeated insistence that he is dead and Kent's warning it could be a trap, she risks everything: pack position, safety, her son's trust to travel as a rogue, even when her wolf form and the group's dangers test her resolve. This flips the usual advice to be rational. It reveals that some truths live only in the body and bond, not in collective agreement, and that refusing to stay broken can feel like betrayal to those who benefit from your stillness. How this affects us today, when a quiet inner certainty contradicts everyone else's certainty. Write it down privately with the exact evidence, or feeling supporting it. Then protect that note like Lauren protected her secret. Secondly, take one small, reversible step toward it without announcing it to critics. Then reassess after that step. If the conviction strengthens, continue. If it fades, you have still reclaimed agency instead of lifelong regret. Third morals. Belonging is not granted by bloodlines, titles, or institutions. It is forged in hostile territory through small, shared vulnerabilities and unexpected moments of play. Lauren, pretending to be a rogue, finds genuine connection with Yasmine, the energetic teen who chases squirrels and playfully tackles James, and the quiet tracker James, despite their outsider status and lack of pack telepathy. Their group bonds over river crossings, shared clothes caches, and mutual protection acts that would be impossible inside rigid pack hierarchy. In it, when conflict arises, replace judgment with a practical offer of help, like Lauren guiding the rogues through pack lands using old knowledge. Schedule one low-stakes, shared activity, walk, meal, game, with people you don't officially belong with. Watch belonging emerge without permission. Here's your final reflection. Luna's rescue uses the familiar shifter romance wrapper, fated mates, inner wolves, pack politics to smuggle in something far more subversive. The idea that the real rescue is never just romantic. It is the daily, uncomfortable work of refusing to let grief, resentment, or inherited roles keep you small. The paranormal disguise makes these lessons hit harder because we watch them play out in bodies that can literally shift form, reminding us that we, too, contain the capacity to become something new the moment we stop pretending we are only what the pack, or our past, says we are.